Kenmore City Council will come to order. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Culver.
Present.
Councilmember Sassen.
Present.
Councilmember Shrubnik. Here. Councilmember Lutsis.
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Here.
Mayor Herbig.
Here.
Councilmember Marshall. Has Councilmember Marshall been excused?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that everyone? Sorry. Okay. Next on the agenda is the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the city of Kenmore is situated upon the ancestral lands of the Snohomish, Snoqualmie, Soxhawtl, Duwamish, Stillaguamish, Tulalip, Suquamish, Muckleshoot, and other tribes who are part of the Coast Salish peoples. We recognize and express our deepest respect for their enduring stewardship and profound relationship with this land, which they have treasured, which they have cherished and protected since time immemorial. We honor the First Peoples, acknowledge their vibrant cultures, and commit ourselves to learning from their wisdom in our journey to promote justice, equity, and mutual understanding. We pledge to stand alongside these communities in acknowledging past injustices and working towards a future that respects and celebrates the diverse heritage of this land. Now, if you'd all please stand and join me in the flag salute.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Unless there are any objections, the agenda will stand approved as published. Being no objections, the agenda is approved. Mr. City Manager, where's the fun?
Well, there's a couple things we want to talk about. One is the 4th of July fireworks show. That was really incredible, and just a well-executed event by my coworkers and the community. We think it's hard to count, but we think there were a good 6,000 people there. And we had one lost child briefly, but we got them reunited with their parents quite quickly, and we had one bee sting. And there they are. Those guys probably helped the person with the bee sting. So thank you, Councilmember Shrubnik, for doing the countdown, and it's just really fun to be part of it. And we got lots of kudos from the community. And then if that wasn't enough, we had our first of the summer concert, and there's the mayor and Hank getting it off to a good start. And what was the name of the band? It was Gig Jig or Jig Jam. Yeah, that was an awesome band. There they are. Lots of fun, really good attendance, great weather. You know, one thing I have to say about our events this summer is we've really threaded the needle with the weather. Like June was kind of cold and rainy, but all of our farmers markets were nice. And then the fireworks show was just right before that heat wave came. And then as soon as the heat wave is over, we have our first concert. So we just totally missed the heat wave. So we're somehow being looked down upon with favor when it comes to our events. So there you have it.
Thank you for that. Next, we've got public comments. We want to welcome folks to the council's meeting. Please address your comments to the mayor and the council. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. If there are more than 20 speakers, we're not going to have more than 20 speakers. The clerk will call your name when it's your turn. Please state your name and city of residence and keep within your allotted time to make every person feel welcome and safe here. Please refrain from booing, clapping, heckling, yelling, or other interruptions. The meeting is recorded for transparency. Thank you for being here and for sharing your input respectfully. Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. These are the guests on site wishing to speak. Gretchen Nixon, followed by Patrick O'Brien, Cara Macias, Elizabeth Mooney, Dakota Rash, and 2 guests waiting online to speak, Tracy Benishinsky and Stacy Valenzuela.
Is this the spot?
My name's Gretchen Nixon. I've been a North Shore resident since 1980. Today, I am presenting the Open Sky Kenmore Citizens Petition, and I'd like to thank everyone on the council that helped me get this off the ground. The citizens petition reads that we request the reduction of the building heights in Kenmore in the city of Kenmore from 4 stories maximum building height from the current 6 stories effective immediately. So we want the buildings shorter. And the reason that I started this petition was I recently went up to Bothell, where I lived for 10 years, and was horrified at what happened up in Bothell. Most of the people moved to Kenmore because it's semi-rural. We love it, want it to keep our open sky. Most of us pay property taxes at a very high rate for the honor of living here with fabulous people like you, keeping everyone under control and providing excellent place to live. We believe that more density will add to the gridlock. We love all of our parks and our businesses, and we just request that you consider this at your next meeting or when you consider things. So thank you for your time. I'm just gonna pass these out.
Could you please hand those to the clerk? Sorry, we can't have things given directly to us. If you could hand it to the clerk, she'll make sure we get it.
Be able to.
It's in the council rules. We're trying to enforce those pretty closely right now. So it's nothing personal. Really appreciate it though. If you give it to Michelle or, okay, super. And I believe we have it through email also.
Mr. O'Brien, Carl Macias.
Good evening, Pat O'Brien, Kenmore. The high moral ground is what you all ascribe to. You have not attained it yet, but you still can. And karma can wreak havoc when you make wrong decisions against Mother Nature. I'm not kidding, it will happen. Right now, the city is moving to suppress our ability to ask for testing and reporting and appropriate dredging techniques for the navigation channel. They've induced one of their employees to write an affidavit stating that Janet and I did not submit any information, and therefore the case should be thrown out. It wouldn't even make it to the hearing examiner. We find that appalling. We have a email string, which I've forwarded to you. Don Raton was part of it. She talked with Claudia Newman about the very same. And that evidence was put in to the record. And now the city is doing everything they can to wiggle out of it and lie about it. And it's up to you to hold them accountable. Why are we, the citizens, going up against 3 attorneys that the city is paying for? We've got Don Raton, Inslee Best litigator. They're paying the hearing examiner, who has not been friendly towards us as unrepresented citizens. And we've got a mountain of information, pictures, and expert witnesses we're waiting to present. And we have no way to do that. This is an unfair, unjust system. And if we sat in front of our peers and had people taking that evidence on and then ruling with a fair judgment, that would be that would be much better than what we're getting with this hearing examiner. I asked him today, what is the percentage of people that appeal anything in this city? What is the percentage of people that ever win against the city? It's stacked, it's one-sided, it's the most unfair thing that I can imagine. It's a rigged game, and your city manager is running the show. And even a parent, he didn't seem to know. He did a Rob Carlindsey, I don't know what's going on. This went out, and now we're gonna have 3 years of industrial activity at Lake Point when we were talking about parks and everything else. Don't tell me he didn't know. He knew, and he was instrumental in bringing it here. He just didn't notify you, is my guess. So you need to be a little bit more on him and figure out what he knows, when he knows it, and hold him and his crew responsible.
Kara Macias, Elizabeth Mooney, Dakota Rash.
Hi, Kara Macias, Kenmore. First off, credit where credit's due. Councilmember Culver, thank you for asking the tough questions about Public Works and the fire station, valid or not. We hear it. Thank you for asking. Councilmember Sassen, thank you for speaking up for the people in South Kenmore. Sometimes people don't even know we exist up there. It's not even part of Kenmore. Yes, it does feel camera saturated. Thank you. Councilmember O'Kane, thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Kane, Thank you very much for speaking up against the cameras. I do not want to live in a minority report state. Thank you. Thank you to everybody who worked to get the movies back, the concerts over at St. Ed's. Thank you. We're back in South Kenmore. Thank you. That was hard work. I know they're not tough to work with. Couple things, please lean into the ped bike access across 522. This was a major call out in our 2014 Target Zero study, and we're a decade later and there's not great access across 522. You are dodging 6 or 7 lanes of traffic to get over here. It's tough, it's tricky, and it's scary with kids. Connects the city as well. I think we need it. The connectivity between here, we know it's tricky. As you discuss the downtown, please keep in mind and have a genuine concurrent conversation about 1, building heights, 2, the manufactured home zoning. The residents are itchy on this. We need an update, something, tell them that you have their back. And I know we hate it, parking downtown with a federal and state push for EVs. This is not going away. We've got to address it. We have to figure it out because it's getting worse downtown. That leads for accidents and more interactions with pedestrians. The bench property, please cover it, plant it, do something. It is like the raggedy entrance to Kenmore. Here's our broken down gas station, and then here's our fenced off cliff. Please, if there's a plan, we got to beautify it somewhere. It's the entrance to the city. And lastly, the crosswalk at 175th and Juanita Drive. I think I talked to Rob about there is the little 2 pieces of the metal artwork being taken down. Thank you. That is so dangerous to drive northbound, and that crosswalk is blind. Please push that. There was an accident last week with cars involved. It's tough. Thanks.
Hi, Elizabeth Mooney, Kenmore. I just want to read what one of my neighbors who agreed with me that I'm going to talk about Skanska proposing to come to Kenmore, and I'm going to talk about Streamfest. So I'll start with Streamfest. Yay, yay, fun time. September 14th. It'll be at Log Boom Park. We're planning that. PERC and Snow King, People for Environmentally Responsible Kenmore, PERC, and Snow King Watershed Council, and other nonprofits, as last year and the year before, will be organizing the event, and times will be determined. I hope you can all come and we'll have fun. We'll give you more details later, but spread the word, please. And this now just has to do with Lake Point and our shoreline, the barges, and the 520 bridge that's going to be continued to go from Portage Bay over to the rest of the west. So since we learned that the city is not able to question the legality of WashDOT's contractor Skanska coming to Lake Point, otherwise known as Kenmore Industrial Park, and this is to support the building of the rest of the west, I contacted our Seattle friends with whom PERC collaborated back a decade ago about the fact that the 520 bridge came here to build the decking, and KGM came to build the decking, and PERC participated in challenging that because there was no Section 7 consultation, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, the good news is we had made friends. And so I contacted, her name is Colleen McAleer, super organized, wonderful woman, concerned about the environment over there in Seattle. Turns out they have a meeting with Skanska on July 25th from 5 to 7 p.m. at St. Demetrius, 2100 East Boyer, Seattle. And I'm just wondering, how come we don't have that? Isn't that sort of the decent thing that they would do? WashDOT would organize once they've got their contractor. So I reached out to some of our friends here and our legislators. And I would like our city to ask about what are the potential significant adverse environmental impacts, health and environment, so that they know and that they conduct a public meeting here. So what type of material will be delivered to Lake Point? I assume there will be large amounts of asphalt, concrete, steel. Here's the big one. I contacted with Jim. Anyway, will the environmental agencies provide ongoing inspections and testing to ensure the contractor is meeting environmental standards? And if so, what is their role and responsibilities? Have all water, air, noise, and wildlife environmental impacts been inventoried and mitigated? I don't even think based on that postcard that they're not leaving out potential things to be added on. The way I read it, it could expand.
Thank you, Ms. Mooney. Dakota Rash.
Good evening, Kenmore City Council and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Dakota Rash. I'm a resident of Lake Forest Park. And I'm here tonight to ask you to please go forward or approve the staff's proposal for Twin Springs. It's later on your agenda for tonight. I think, and I guess backing up, I want to make my comment tonight about accessibility, specifically accessibility to green spaces, which is something I've advocated before you all about before. In fact, some of my first comments were here about St. Edward's State Park back when I was still, I think in high school, or was that undergrad? I'm not sure. I think accessibility to green spaces is a very nuanced topic, because I think in an ideal world, we would have pockets of green spaces such that everyone could get to those green spaces in whatever mode they need to be transported in. So walking, biking, and cars if necessary. But I think that last factor that's where the nuance is, because as I've probably explained to you all before and rabidly pounded my fists about, cars are, I think, slowly draining the life out of the green spaces in this country because of their increasing size over and over and over again. We build roads bigger, we build parking lots bigger, we build parking spaces bigger, more and more and more. And that takes away from doing other things like green spaces. And so I think it is important to cut the right balance between making sure that everyone has access to parks, including those who need to use vehicles to get around, but also not letting cars be the only method to get out to green spaces. Dozens, and way more than dozens, I don't know why that was the word that sprung to my mind. Many studies have showed that we find much greater mental, emotional, and physical health when we are able to enjoy green spaces without relying on cars, and that the pollution created by those vehicles overwhelms any kind of positive benefit we would have from being in those green spaces when we are in car-dominant environments more often than we are able to have access to those pockets of green spaces. So I really appreciate that the city has proposed a good medium. I think they've found that nuance. They are updating that parking lot, but they're not expanding it. And so I would encourage you to please go forward with that and then look for more opportunities to continue a good trend that is already existing in Kenmore with great local parks like Swamp Creek and Twacadis and St. Ed's, increasing the little pockets of green spaces, well, St. Ed's is pretty big, such that all of the residents may get to a green space in their daily routine if they so choose without having to climb into a vehicle. And if they do need to climb into a vehicle, that there is a place where they can park that vehicle and enjoy a green space. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rash. Mayor Arbig, that concludes our online speakers list. Shall we move on to online comments?
Yes.
We'll hear from Tracy Benishinsky, followed by Stacey Valenzuela. Tracy, can you hear us?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Tracy Bonashinsky, Kenmore. Good evening, Council. I come before you tonight to ask you to support the staff recommendation to proceed with number 6 only in Twin Springs Park Phase 1 CIP, which is to refurbish the existing parking lot and access at the southern entrance. We do not need a parking lot at the north end of the park, especially given the existing south parking lot, a large area of cutout street parking on 80th Avenue Northeast, and the possible creative shared use of existing parking at Northeast 192nd and 80th. Instead of adding more hardscape to the park, we can use the asphalt and concrete already existing in and around the park to meet the same needs. It may seem like a small area, but the proposed parking lot at the north end of the park would result in compacted soil, killing the rich microbial life in healthy soils and disconnecting that area of soil from the whole. Microbial organisms play a critical role in the food web and nutrient cycling within soil. Gravel parking lots are generally not considered pervious surfaces and are not by King County, meaning this new parking lot would create additional stormwater runoff in an already struggling watershed. Stormwater runoff would also be produced by the proposed 5 by 5 foot concrete pad. Further, adding a parking lot to the natural area could disturb the nearby beaver family and a whole host of wildlife that already live in the park and that have been attracted there by the rich environment provided by the beaver pond. We are losing an increasing number of wooded lots to short plats. Many of them have wetlands or seasonal streams, and the least fit to develop are almost all that is left to developers gobbling up properties to make a profit on housing, making the protection and preservation of publicly owned natural spaces and thoughtfully connecting them all the more important. Disconnecting habitats is one of the top contributors to the loss of biodiversity in our ecosystems. One of my concerns with the proposed phase 1 developments is that they would contribute to the continued fragmentation of habitat for wildlife in Kenmore. Urban wildlife need places to live too. Twin Springs has been described in planning documents as a neighborhood, not a destination park, and we should encourage walking and rolling as ways to access it. This is better for human health, the environment, climate goals, and the wildlife we share space with. And all this said, there are plenty of places already for people to put their vehicles if they need or want to drive when visiting the park. Again, I hope you will support the current staff recommendation for Twin Springs Park. Thank you so much for your time and consideration tonight.
Stacy Valenzuela.
Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. Can you hear me?
We hear you. Go on.
Thank you. I appreciate several of the changes stated in the plans for the Twin Springs Park to keep this special location natural habitat with environmental protection rather than intrusion to keep the floodplain wetland protected. It's so important in our ecosystem, but we need no additional parking. I asked also if the wetland biologist was ever consulted, as we would like to see their report. We would also like to see long-term protection or the covenant extended. Was the Urban Land Institute even informed by staff or council about the protections of the Heron Rookery, the wetlands, the distance of the encroachment? It seems that in the plans drawing the encroachment on both of these with sound transit, yet the residents' request for public works to be located outside the boundary on 73rd was deemed by staff and council unacceptable. Is this directive for the health, safety, protection of our environment, preservation, and our community? Do you know that the heron fly over our houses squawking anytime intrusive activity is at the rookery? They're being disturbed weekly. Sadly, the solution from ULI is EV buses and 4 stories of 2 separate 2-story garage locations. Still hundreds of cars with exhaust noise, and the location is even closer with the road surrounding all sides, cutting the rookery all down. Priority list. Hope our resident priorities of testing, remediation, and preservation stay on the forefront with actions that are dated to happen sooner than later. In other news, my neighbors are down to 2 weeks before several may be priced out of their homes they own. Many are ill. 3 taken by ambulance in my community. 3 passed at the other community, likely from stress of rent increases, notices, 49-page leases, and 26 pages of rules. How long do you think it will be before the park property owner confiscates these homes from their relatives? We need to have our local emergency transition funding until the county or state comes forward. We need preservation, protection, and support for rent stabilization. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Herbeck, that concludes everyone signed in to speak.
All right, I want to thank everybody who came for public comment. Next on the agenda is a public hearing on proposed ordinance 24-0612, amending and extending interim regulations for an additional 6 months for certain parcels close to Swamp Creek in proximity to SR 522 and 80th Avenue Northeast, presented by Community Development Director Debbie Bent.
Good evening, Council. Just to provide some context before you open the public hearing for comment. In 2022, interim regulations were adopted along portions of the SR 522 corridor to allow time for the Planning Commission and Council to develop transit-oriented development regulations. In November of 2022, Council adopted TOD regulations with the exception of 13 parcels surrounding Swamp Creek. The interim regulations were kept in place for those 13 parcels pending conducting a channel restoration assessment of Swamp Creek that would determine where channel restoration would provide the most ecological benefit. That assessment is underway and results should be coming to council in the next few months. Once that assessment is complete, then the next step would be to assess what regulations should be imposed on those 13 parcels. But for now, we are requesting that the interim regulations are extended for an additional 6 months through January 2025. Apologies, there was a typo in the ordinance that said January 2024. That has been corrected and reposted on the website. And so if council wishes to move forward with adopting the ordinance tonight, it will mean through January 2025. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for staff before we open up the public hearing? Councilor Assassin.
It's a simple question. Is 6 months sufficient?
Hopefully, it will be sufficient to have the results. If it needs, it might need to be extended one additional 6 months to allow time to develop the regulations and move through the process for adopting the regulations. But we can only adopt it at a 6 month period at a time.
Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to declare the public hearing open. For the public hearing, folks will be granted 3 minutes to speak. Same public comment rules apply, including stating your name and city of residence and addressing your comments directly to the city council. If your comments have been fully expressed by preceding speakers, we encourage you to summarize your statement by stating your name, city of residence, and saying that I agree with the previous speaker. We will hear testimony from any on-site guests first, followed by pre-registered virtual guests. Thank you for taking the time to participate in the public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. It looks like we have one person wishing to speak on site on the public hearing, Patrick O'Brien.
Pat O'Brien, Kenmore. I think this is probably a very good ordinance. We certainly need to clarify where the TOD is, what the city wants as far as output. I live on 181st. I've got a 74 unit for seniors in the plans, and it just so happens that the person that I'm wrestling with over this issuance of non-significance for the dredging project is the same person I got to talk to about that project. Isn't life funny? So I think we need clarification of the maps, and I think we need to have Rob Carlinzi give direct orders to the people in permitting, number one, as to what the city is looking for as far as development, because as you know, there's quite a few properties that were built in the 40s that have not changed at all since the city, well, the city reduced the building height from 60 to 35 feet. And that absolutely killed the development prospects for that. And yet we have a looming implementation of the TOD with the force of the county, the state, and the Sound Transit behind it, where the city may effectively lose control of zoning in that TOD area. So I just want, I've gone into the city multiple times and asked for clarification. What do you want? Tell us what you want and we will design to that standard. And well, build whatever you want. Well, no, that doesn't take muster. And how many times you have to visit an architect to do a redraw when you could have gotten clear information. We need more senior housing. We need handicapped housing. We need special needs people housing. We need families, low-income families. Whatever it is, spell it out. We'll find the developer. Thank you.
Mayor, there's no one else on site wishing to speak. Shall we move on to virtual comments?
Yes.
We have two guests wishing to speak, Tracy Bereshinsky followed by Stacy Valenzuela. Tracy, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Go on.
Tracy Bonashinsky, Kenmore. Hello again, Honorable Mayor, Honorable Deputy Mayor, and Honorable Council members. I come before you tonight to ask for your support of Ordinance 24-0612 to amend and extend interim regulations for an additional 6 months for certain parcels close to Swamp Creek in proximity to SR 522 and 80th Avenue Northeast. I appreciate that council approved the original ordinance. It was a recognition that our city can do something to reverse past degradations to our urban watershed by affording Swamp Creek greater protections, in this case as it runs through the TOD, and ensuring restoration potential as we also make space for a dense TOD to grow our community. I encourage you to support the ordinance before you as a continuation of your past good work and to allow the channel restoration assessment to be completed. Thank you for the time before you this evening and for your service to our community. I appreciate you all very much, and I'll see you the rest of my time.
Thank you. Stacy Valenzuela.
Stacy Valenzuela Kenmore, can you hear me?
We can go on.
Thank you. I would appreciate the TOD ordinance being continued. I also ask that you include the 25% affordable housing. Specifically, please, not more than 30 to 40%, if that can be stated as below affordable housing, because we need the developers to know what we need in Kenmore. And Kenmore can reach these goals in our city if they put forward that information clearly, instead of leaving it up to 80%, 70%, which we've already reached those goals. I think that staying strong and enforcing this with action and denying variances also makes a good statement. At the developers panel that the city had, the developers themselves stated that unless you have 25% or more required affordable housing units in each development, there is no other effective way to get to the needed lowest income units being built. Believe them. We appreciate this. This is huge and it's desperately needed in our area. Thank you very much.
Mayor Herbig, we have no one else wishing to speak.
Is there anybody else present wishing to be heard? Anybody else in person wishing to be heard? Is there anyone else wishing to be heard? All right, with that, I'm declaring the public hearing closed. Move on to the business agenda, proposed ordinance number 24-0612. Ms. Bent.
Staff recommends that council pass a motion adopting the ordinance. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Councilmember Culver.
Thank you. What options do we have for for including those requirements with affordability? I don't know the particulars on this. Is that something you could elaborate on for us?
The interim regulations do speak to that, and they do include that 25% of the total units do remain affordable. In the TOD regs that were adopted elsewhere along the corridor, there is also an affordability requirement.
Sweet, thank you.
Any further questions? Councilor Lutzis.
Just a comment. This brings back some fond memories since 2 years ago, I was on the planning commission presenting these regulations, recommended regulations. So I'm very familiar with this. I think, this is beneficial in terms of our vision for this area about concentrating density in this area close to transit, with also that addition of affordability close to accessible transit. So I think this is great, while also balancing that need and that consideration for the environmental impact while we continue to do that Swamp Creek study, which I think is absolutely necessary. So I am certainly in favor of continuing this ordinance.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion to approve proposed ordinance number 24-0612, amending and extending interim regulations for an additional 6 months for certain parcels close to Swamp Creek in proximity to SR 22 and 80th Avenue Northeast.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from the deputy mayor, a second from Councilmember Culver. Any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Culver,
Yes.
Councilmember Lutsis,
Yes.
Councilmember Sassen,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 6 votes in favor, the ordinance is adopted.
All right, that brings us to our presentation. Fire District Update by Shoreline Fire Department Fire Chief Matt Cowan.
Thank you, Council. I really enjoy coming and being able to address you in person. I don't get out of my office too much for these kinds of things, and I really enjoy being able to have this dynamic and be able to answer any questions that you may have. I have about a handful of slides to talk about why we are here, and then I'd love to entertain any questions that you may have. So just to start with, as you are probably aware, AV has gone up. Our situation is mostly driven by the costs and where we're at with our funding mechanism. So I'm going to start with the assessed valuation. This is assessed valuation for both Lake Forest Park and Kenmore, so it's a little bit different than what you're probably used to. But this trend line is probably not news to anybody. You've seen this. I'm sure you've seen this in your budget, annual budgets and biannual, but there's been some blips here and there, and I'm going to talk about where it's impacted us with our equivalent levy rate. The levy rate, what I call the equivalent levy rate, is a combination between both our fire levy and the fire benefit charge. And as you can see, the trend has been down over time, and that's predominantly because the North Shore Fire Department has been especially lean through many years, and it's been very judicious with the money that it's spent. But as you'll see, there was when we got to about 2022 is when Shoreline took over the management of the North Shore Fire Department, and you saw a big dip in the equivalent levy rate. That was because of some of the savings and everything that occurred in the efficiencies when we joined together. It was also coupled with, if I went back a slide, you'd see there was a jump in the AV that year as well, which helped. But there were savings that we accomplished in that year. Unfortunately, and I'll take the blame on this, we'd only had a handful of months of managing the contract, and we had not dived into some of the impacts of the capital projects that had been deferred and delayed from the North Shore Fire Department. So that's why you also see a spike up for this year. So we had a kind of a roller coaster there we had a big dip and then it bounced back up. And we didn't realize until we were into the 2023 calendar year of some of the projects that really need to be funded and that were, I can go into details, but I won't bore you with it, but some of the things that really need to be addressed. And so I felt it was incumbent upon me as the fire chief to try and get us back to a path that was going to fix and address some of these issues, which is why you saw a big drop and then a big increase. And it was unfortunate because we could have dropped it some and not increased it some, and it would have, and people would not have seen the big swings, which of course brought a lot of attention to what's been going on. But that again, I'll take the blame on that. I was really excited and happy that we were able to drop the rates, and I didn't know about the capital projects that had been deferred and so forth, but that was my fault. But fast forwarding to why we're here is this is a trend line over the last 11 years. And the blue is your levy rate and the red is our fire benefit charge. And those are the predominant ways that we receive revenues in the North Shore Fire Department. And going back to 2013, you'll see that it was at about $1. That was the last time it was at $1 on the levy rate, which is the maximum capacity on the levy rate when you have a fire benefit charge. The fire benefit charge at that time was about 50 cents. And you can see where the levy rate has dropped each year and the fire benefit charge has up and down, but taken more of the cost burden for managing the operations of the department. And that's because I'm sure you're familiar with the 1%, caps on the fire levy side, and we are under that same, regulation. So as the fire levy is capped and on the revenue side and AV goes up by more than 1%, that fire levy drops. But the costs go up anywhere from 3 to 6%. Sometimes a couple of years ago, one of the big reasons why there was another spike in the equivalent levy rate is we had a 10.1% increase in CPI. 80% of our costs are driven by personnel costs, so that has a direct and significant impact on things. And that's also why you see some pretty big fluctuations over the last few years. Excuse me. Anyway, the fire benefit charge is also capped at 60% of our operating budget. So as the fire levy has dropped, but costs have increased by more than that 1% of levy, the fire benefit charges should take more and more and more of that weight. And now it's pushing the 60% cap. This has been known for at least over the last 7 or 8 years. It has been previous administrations prior to Shoreline taking on the contract have known about this. Staff has made the recommendations to do a lid lift in previous years, and it has not been done. I'm not going to guess as to the different reasons, but it's been deferred and deferred to the point now that we are, kind of at that point where it's critical. I also want to mention too that we're not talking about significantly increasing our revenues. In fact, they may even go down for next year, but I'm looking at trying to keep them about the same. It is the analogy I use is you have a pie and we're slicing up that pie. We're not trying to make the pie bigger. We're just trying to slice it in a different way. So as and the lid lift language is about an 18 cents increase in the fire levy side, but we're also anticipating that an equivalent drop in the fire benefit charge and I can't guarantee this because I don't know what assessed values are. We just got CPI, which is 3.8%. So I can start forecasting what the impacts are for 2025. And we're in the middle of our budget process right now. But as I get the assessed values and all that, I'll be able to forecast this out a lot better. But unfortunately, it's going to be well beyond the point where we've already voted on this ballot measure. So again, I want to stress this because a lot of people believe that we're looking to increase revenue significantly, and that's not the case. So I have some summary points here, and most of them I've already talked about. It's also so that you can share with the public and you can post this and so forth. Again, I want to, I'll just go through them. The 1% increase, the 60% on the fire benefit charge. Most fire departments do this. They do a lid lift every now and then. Some departments more often than others, especially if you don't have the fire benefit charge and a way to balance the budget. Fire departments in the past, it was every 3 or 4 years. A previous department that I was at was every 3 or 4 years we do a lid lift. We have not done one in 20 years. 20 years. It's taken 20 years to get down to this point where we're at. And unfortunately, the timing, I'm going to talk about the RFA in a sec too, but the timing isn't great because we have a ballot measure here in August and potentially another one in February, which I'll talk about here in a second. This is not a surprise. It's been known for the last 7 or 8 years. And again, I'm not looking for a big increase in funding. This ballot measure itself is going to take a simple majority, 50% plus 1 vote to pass. But again, I just mentioned this, we're talking about forming an RFA, probably going to the ballot on February of next year, where you have a planning committee that's formed and developing that plan as we speak. In fact, I had a meeting earlier tonight on this. It's not for sure yet. It has to go back to both boards to get approved and so forth. And the timing isn't great because we have this ballot measure for the lid lift on August, but now we're potentially turning around in February and people, might not understand why we have to do these back to back. The lid lift will buy us the time, for next year to be able to get to that RFA and reset again. If for some reason the RFA is proposed and not approved, then we absolutely are going to be needing this lid lift now. So this was a way to make sure that we are setting up for the future, even though we have back-to-back measures. On the RFA, there's been some talk as well. It is super important to both the North Shore and the Shoreline boards that there's geographical representation. The draft that we have already for the planning, the RFA Planning Committee, is to make sure that that both boards of 5 come together as a board of 10 to ensure that there's representation from Lake Forest Park and Kenmore, and not just 7, 8, 10, 11 electeds, from Shoreline or from Lake Forest Park or from Kenmore, that there's a distribution across the areas that are being served. That may change in the future. The board can adopt a different position, but I can absolutely tell you with 100% certainty that it is super important to all the electeds that there's geographical representation. We've heard it from the people, we've heard it from council members, we've heard it from everybody. And that part will not change. And this ensures that, as opposed to an at-large vote, which then it could be, from anywhere. We are looking for input and involvement in the RFA planning process. We had a meeting today, but we are looking to have more of a open house dialogue, in those meetings. Right now, they're more of a planning, meeting, but we are planning on having more open house. It is the 3rd Monday of each month. Our next meeting is on August 19th. And we flip-flop between Station 51 here in Kenmore and 61 in Shoreline. Next month is in Shoreline. So some information. So if you'd like more information, we have a button on our webpage, the Shoreline website, where it'll talk. You can click on the lid lift, and you can click on the RFA, which takes you to information on both the measures and FAQs and so forth. There's also on the King County website, again, you can share it. They have language, the explanatory language on the ballot measure for the lid lift. They have the pro statement, some other information about the vote itself and so forth. And they even added that it's likely to be cost neutral as far as the impacts from apples to apples. And then, of course, you can always contact me as well. Email me. Again, I'm happy to come back and address the council. Assuming that the planning committee goes forward and it's approved by both boards, I'll probably be in front of you again to talk about the RFA later this year. It does have to go to the county for to get on the ballot in December 13th, I believe is the date. So that was about as quick as I could go. I'm sorry. There's probably a bit of details in there, but I'd be very happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
Councilor Lutzis.
Yeah, thank you very much for this insightful presentation. I just have a couple of quick questions. You said merging both boards to make a 10-member board. I know typically it's common practice not to have an even numbered board. Right. So is that still, I'm not sure what the thought was in terms of long range, looking at that, how to sort of accommodate and address that.
It is an interesting number. I will tell you that it's a little bigger than I would like as well. I'd rather have a board of around 7 would be, if you're asking me personally, 7 would probably be a good number, and it is an odd number. We do have a subject matter expert that is helping walk us through the process, an attorney. And he has done a number of these things, and he has done boards that have an even number. And he has said that it's never come up before. And I'll just share with you my own personal feeling. I have a board of 5 commissioners in Shoreline and 5 here in North Shore. And for me, if I'm at, even if it's a 3-2 vote, I don't consider that really an approval, even though it's a majority vote. For me, I really look for at least a 4. Sometimes there's somebody that votes on things and that's different, but I really look for 4-1 votes and 5-0 votes. If I'm at a 3-2 vote, I feel like I haven't done my job and I need to reevaluate. So I don't feel, I agree with you, a 10 is an odd, not odd, sorry. It's an even number, but it's kind of odd to have an even number potentially. But I don't feel like that's too big of an issue. Moving forward.
Yeah, thank you very much for addressing that first question. My second one is, how does contracting services, first when North Shore contracted with Shoreline, and now with this bigger body contracting administrative services to Bothell, impact the budget and the outlook over the long term? Is that more of a strain? Does it help in terms of pooling resources? I'm curious your thoughts.
It's a great question. So the ILA, the interlocal agreement that we have currently with North Shore, got us a lot of the efficiencies, not all, but a lot of the efficiencies. Let's just say it's 90%, 91.7%. I don't know the exact number, but it got us a lot of the efficiencies that an RFA would, because it is a complete merger. It's just, we still have the North Shore Fire Department and the Shoreline Fire Department, but it got us a lot of those efficiencies. So there's still some out there, and we are going to save some money overall going to an RFA. It will drop it'll probably, again, forecasting out with some very gross numbers, but it'll probably drop the equivalent levy rate here in Kenmore and Lake Forest Park by a few cents, maybe as much as 7 or 8 cents. And only because there's some efficiencies there, but there's not a lot of savings. So it was pretty complete. But when we start talking about the potential of Bothell, and we're not talking about it, but there's the city council there has considered and even before they considered going with Shoreline for the executive level administrative services, they were talking about an RFA and all that. So it's definitely, potentially on the radar, but they're not talking about it. I want to show some success with the relationship that we have now, at least till the end of the year, and then we can start talking about what's happening in the future. There would probably be some significant savings there, again, because there would be better efficiencies overall. Whereas we gained some of that already gained a lot of the efficiency with North Shore, there would probably be quite a bit more efficiencies with bringing Bothell on. But I have not done a full cost analysis of that. And I won't unless, Bothell gets serious about pursuing an RFA with us. But, and it's a little bit more difficult too, because it's intertwined with the city, funds. So it'll be hard to kind of pull those out and give an accurate number until we're really, involved. So I think that there's a lot of efficiencies there. I think it would help. I know for a fact it would improve levels of service. I know for a fact that we'd get other efficiencies operationally, logistically, and I truly believe that we would get financial savings and efficiencies there as well. That's one of the. I've always been a big proponent of regionalization for my entire career, mostly because if we are standing up in front of council or our voters and asking for money, we need to be able to say that we are spending the money accurately, appropriately, and be able to defend that. And if we're not being as efficient as we can, then we have a hard time saying that. And regionalization, bigger isn't always better, but if you do it with the right motivation, right intent, right transparency, that's something that I truly believe in, and put all the information out there, then, and it still looks good, then it's usually a good thing.
So an RFA would, in the long run, gain us a couple more efficiencies and save taxpayers a few cents.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
The RFA for the North Shore Shoreline RFA, because it's the initial RFA, even though we both have fire benefit charges, it would take a 60% majority vote plus one, because it's essentially reestablishing the fire benefit charge, which triggers a supermajority. In the future, if Bothell wanted to come on, or I can't imagine anybody else, but if Bothell wanted to come on, it'd be a simple majority and they would absorb into our structure. And then all of the assessed valuations and so forth would be homogenized. It would be, averaged out across all of it. And I believe that it would create, financial savings for everybody.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Shubnik.
Yeah, thank you for coming. I think we had heard cryptically about this, and it's very close to when folks are going to have to vote. So it's interesting that we haven't seen any information in the community about this, or at least I think that could be challenging. So, and how as we were talking, I went to the website to look at the explanatory statement and the pro statement. It talks about the 0.18, right, the mill rate increase, which on an average, a median household, at least in Kenmore, would be about $150 a year, and the pro statement talks about $50. I assume that's because that's being balanced by a reduction in the benefit charge. Is that right? Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
When the pro committee approached me, people approached me and wanted to write the pro statement, and they asked for information. And at that time,
Yeah.
I didn't know, I know more now than when I did back then. And I said, I don't believe that this is going to increase, our revenues substantially. At the time, I was thinking maybe a few percent, if that, in revenues. But at this time, I actually think it might be somewhere near neutral, so it might not even be $50. And that is the unfortunate that the explanatory statement can't talk about what we're going to do with the fire benefit charge, because people will just focus on the increase in the levy rate
Correct.
and not look any further and recognize that there's a decrease in that we're planning a decrease in the fire benefit
Right.
charge.
And that's exactly
Yeah.
why I'm raising this
And,
issue.
and I apologize for it is a compressed timeline. We were actually planning on trying to look at an RFA this fall, not a lid lift. So we didn't have to do back-to-back measures because the RFA would fix this. And then there was concerns about that being way too compressed. And there was even some citizens that came forward and asked for it to delay. And the board listened and said, you know what? We need to delay that to next year and give more time so everybody can absorb it, but we need to do a lid lift now. And so we had to pivot. And so it's a bit compressed,
Yeah.
with trying to get language.
Are you precluded, are fire districts precluded from using the regular November cadence? I mean, I noticed both of these are special election
Right.
periods.
No, well,
Okay.
the fire benefit charge, or I'm sorry, the RFA, it's more critical to do that in a special election and
Okay.
not in November, only because if it's not in place by the end of October, you cannot access revenues until not the following year, but the year after.
Right.
So
miss a
we
whole
were
year.
targeting an August ballot measure for the RFA so that we could, in 2025, be completely and be off and running as an RFA. And not waiting until 2026. And so if we did it in a November election, that would
Right.
occur for the RFA. Now on the lid lift, it's not as important because you don't have to have the RFA is much more complicated to get everything, figured out with the county. We could have done a November election. I prefer to not be embroiled in any, especially this November election, but I personally like to not be in general elections and just on our own. So it's very clear as to, what we're trying to do. And that was supported at the time that we made the decision.
Okay. I just, like I said, I have the two concerns just about, confusing the voters, having two different things, neither of which are on a general election, and the confusion between the benefit charge. Is that also a mill rate, the benefit charge?
The fire benefit charge
yeah.
is what?
Is it also a mill rate per thousand on a property, or is it a per parcel, or what is that?
The fire benefit charge is a per square foot
Per square foot,
fee.
okay.
That is based off the risk and the size of the structure.
Okay.
So a riskier structure has a higher rate. A bigger structure has a higher rate. That's why I say equivalent levy rate to try and have a comparison of apples to apples, but it's not.
Right,
It's
not the
not a
same.
levy rate. It's
Right.
not based off assessed valuations at all.
Okay, well, I would be happy to support a resolution in, I guess we can't do it in this one, but in our only one more meeting.
Oh, we can get to that after. we
Oh,
do
okay,
public
sorry.
comment. Any further questions for the chief? Councilor Sassen.
Thank you for being here, Chief. My question has to do with the RFA efficiencies. I'm just wondering if you could characterize those efficiencies for a little bit. Just to be transparent, I'm hoping that those are administrative efficiencies and not, professional services, facilities, or equipment. I don't want to see us having fewer feet on the ground, as it were. So.
No, thank you. That's a great question. We've actually improved levels of service in the ILA back in 2022 when North Shore and Shoreline got together then. And we are continuing with those levels of service and we are not looking at a decrease. in that at all. You're absolutely correct. It is in the administrative side for the finances. There is some logistical and some operational efficiencies as well. For example, I won't answer to 2 different boards with 2 different budgets, with different policies, with different meetings, and so forth. I will have 1 board, 1 budget, one set of meetings to go to. I'm being selfish. But there are also some redundancies in some of, things like we can decrease insurance costs. We can, there is a part-time board secretary position that will likely be eliminated. There's things like that. There isn't a lot there, but there is some. Where we could potentially see some bigger savings in the RFA is we also have reserves. Both North Shore and Shoreline have reserves. And as we mitigate any potential liability and risk, and as we merge those 2 departments formally to all the way together, there's the potential that we wouldn't have to carry as much in reserves, for different things. And there's some savings there, and that's a board decision. That's not something that I'll present on, but it's a board decision that, once we start looking at that and trying to make an assessment on where we're comfortable with that liability, there might be some savings there too, but we're only improving levels of service. We've already started to do some more improvement here at 51 with having more technical rescue technicians on duty, and we continue to do the same things that we've done before. So there's not going to be a decrease in level of service.
Councilor Culver.
Thank you, Mayor Herbig, and thank you for clarifying. We can do a endorsement tonight. For transparency, I was part of the S committee. Thank you, Chief, for coming and speaking to these things. We know that that's been a lot over the last few years with all of the changes that the fire district has seen. So we appreciate you. Thank you. Just the top line for folks. This is going to be cost neutral and likely even potentially, maybe I won't put words in your mouth, but potentially even cost savings over the longer period with an RFA. And it's really just, different buckets of money, right? It's the fire benefit versus the levy lid lift, if I'm getting that order right, which we're raising for the first time in 20 years. That's what we're looking at, right?
Correct. And that gives me an opportunity to make sure that I elaborate enough to the increase that we had to do for 2024, why that spiked back up was to catch up on capital projects and deferred maintenance and replacements and so forth. I don't anticipate that level needs to be maintained for more than 2, maybe 3 years. So as we look at getting these things, I still look at a downward trend in the equivalent levy rate. And that's why I can say with some certainty, that we may stay cost neutral this next year, or maybe it might, or marginally up or down. I don't know yet, because we are addressing and aggressively addressing in this year with some of the capital projects, and we do need to invest again next year, and then it'll probably decrease in 2026. Everything else being equal. But I am hoping that we can be either cost neutral or maybe even a little bit of savings. Again, depending on what SS values come back as, we know that CPI now is 3.8%. 3.8%. I haven't done any cost forecasting yet, but I am in the middle of budget season right now.
Cool, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
A couple of questions. We've had some folks come to this council, and one of the concerns that was brought up that I'm glad you addressed a bit was the regional representation on any potential RFA. And one suggestion that was tossed up by a member of the public was the possibility of having each of the cities appoint a council member to the board. Is that something that's being discussed at all, or?
It was discussed, and that's still a potential for in the future, or even during. It's not set in stone at this point, and I don't want to speak for the boards. I can report out as to what the conversation was, which was the most important thing was to make sure that there was representation from the different cities and not at large. And to do that, it has to be electeds, and to ensure that there's representation from with the fire commissioners as well. We determined that it would be best to keep the fire districts the way they are, and the electeds that come out of those 2 fire districts to populate that board of 10. It could change in the future. one of the things is that this city, I mean, no disrespect to any of you, you guys are focused on, managing the city. The elected fire commissioners are focusing on managing the fire department. It's a much smaller subset of the work that you do, but it is a little bit more focused. And it's not to say that any of you couldn't be a great and contributing member on that governing board. And if you're interested, or I can take the message back to see, if the boards are considering, you would consider that. But we wanted to start with as simple as possible. And that was just taking the existing electeds and putting them together. I do believe that in the coming years, whether Bothell joins or not, that there will be a change. 10 is not, again, I'd like 7, but I don't always get my way, but I'd like it to be less than 10. But I think there's also an opportunity to integrate a little bit better, potentially with city council members. But again, we were looking at trying to make it as simple as possible to start with.
No, totally understood. And then while I have you here, I apologize going a little off topic, but we do hear from folks, especially in South Kenmore, who are concerned about response times, that sort of thing. And you have had that station sitting empty or being used for storage for years. And I do know there's a plan now to demolish the building and do something with that land. How do you feel about, I guess what I'm asking is, it is an area that if you're coming from anywhere else in the district, I guess until you gobble up Bothell, there's only really one access to South Kenmore, the bridge. How confident do you feel about response times in South Kenmore?
I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time, because this could be a longer one, but I'll try and be brief. I'm always trying to look at, let me back up. Whenever I'm looking at regionalization, or I'm looking at adding a station or taking a station out, or any of those things, for me, it's always about level of service. It's always about maintaining or improving the levels of service. And if we can do that and be fiscally responsible, great. If we are financially challenged and we have to, cut costs or decrease things, okay, but I really try to focus on levels of service. So when we start talking about South Kenmore, there are longer response times. I still think we have fairly good response times everywhere, assuming that the bridge is there. But we have longer response times to that area, so it is a point of concern. It isn't a huge amount of calls, not to the level that would likely trigger a need for staffing a station at this time. But there is, growth that's occurring, and we could do some things potentially if we were looking at a regionalized approach to increase the call volumes there, so that it would be more justified. As I want to say, it was about high 400s per year for call volumes. And typically you want at least 600 or 800, 900 calls a year, because staffing a fire station is expensive. It's not just building a station. It might, building a station there, it might look pretty and all that, but if we're not staffing it, then it really does not increase the level of service that's being provided there. Back to the point about the RFA and potentially some of the efficiencies there, South Bothell also has a problem in that it's for the same exact reason. So as we look to the future, there's the possibility that we could look at building a station that is probably not where the one that we own now, but somewhere a little bit further east, and be able to address both South Bothell and South Kenmore, in an approach that has enough call volumes to justify it. I do want to assure everybody, though, that what we're talking about here is non-critical calls. When we start talking about response times, if you have a critical call, all the apparatus have AVL dispatching, which means that there's a computer that's always tracking where it's at, and dispatch will send the closest unit for a structure fire, major car wreck, for a heart attack, for there's a handful of calls that trigger the immediate response, regardless of borders, regardless of what the color of the fire engine or the patch or the whatever. It sends the closest unit to ensure that everybody's being treated as quickly as possible. And what that means in South Kenmore is that sometimes it's 51, but sometimes it's also the Kirkland units that come up there, just like we serve from Shoreline into Seattle or to Snohomish County, and from here into Snohomish County, we have soft borders when it comes to critical calls. So I mean, that was longer, but it was short, actually.
No, I appreciate it.
So,
I think a lot of folks, aren't familiar with the mutual aid agreements that every department has with every other neighboring department. And
I have to weigh the costs of, a new station. There's at least 13, 14 million in today's dollars. And that's a lot of money, but that's actually not the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is going to be another $1.72 million a year just to staff it. And so I hate to say it, but we look at a cost benefit there and making sure that we're spending because I would also argue that we have a need here in going north. There's some longer response times just going north too. And we have to weigh all of those things and where we're spending the taxpayers' dollars.
Appreciate that. Any further questions for the chief? All right, seeing no further questions then, I guess, do you want me to turn over to you, city attorney, for a second? I'll turn over to the city attorney.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, would you like me to just outline a little bit of the process and the ability to have this discussion and potential action?
Yes, if you could.
Okay. So as I've mentioned before, when there is a pending ballot measure or a person for elective office, state law prohibits the use of public facilities to either oppose or support them, except for action taken at a council meeting to express a collective decision, to vote upon a motion, resolution, ordinance in support or in opposition, as long as there's notice in your agenda which identifies the ballot, the title, the number, and gives an opportunity for the public to give an opposing view. And we have provided, or staff has provided, the required state notice. And so this council has done the procedural requirements and has the opportunity to take action to oppose or support this pending ballot measure.
Before we would do that, we would want to open up public comment. Okay.
Yes, please.
All right, so per RCW 4217A 555-1, members of the public who would like to weigh in on the 2024 North Shore Fire Levy Rate Ballot Measure, also known as Proposition 1, can come and have their voices heard. Clerk, do we have anybody signed up to speak on this?
Verifying, stand by. There was one guest signed up to speak on this special topic, Patrick O'Brien. However, I do not see him in the building.
Okay. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to make public comment? Yes, you can. Either
Looks
way.
like Kara Macias would like to speak.
Same general public comment rules apply.
Okay. Kara Macias, Kenmore. I just had a quick note because I am in South Kenmore. I think when you're talking about 54 and that combined potential with Bothell in the future, it might be good to kind of outline what that timeline looks like. Maybe is it 4 years? Is it 3 years? Is it 10 years? I think that might give some people a little bit better sense of ease that yes, there might be a little longer lead time, but this is on the horizon within this timeline. I think that might gather a bit more support from the people on the south end.
Right.
Am I allowed to
I'd prefer if actually took this conversation out into the lobby when we're done. I think that'd be cleaner. All right, so there's no further public comment. Councilmember Culver.
I would move for this council to endorse the levy on the August 2024 primary.
Second, if that's the correct way to have a resolution.
City Attorney, does that,
So-
what do you need from us?
So, okay, thank you. So it really depends on how you want to express yourself. Of course, you can endorse it, and what I would envision as the mechanism is that you can collectively move and act upon, we endorse it, which then could be posted. If the intent, however, is to authorize the city manager to execute a resolution in support of the ballot measure, that would be a different, more appropriate motion, but it really depends on what you're intending.
Would we be able to have a resolution, say, on next week's consent agenda?
Absolutely, but we would still need the public notice, so when that's in front of you, it'd have that same opportunity, but yes, you can.
Okay. I will defer then to the potential second on whether she's actually seconding or.
I guess I have a follow-up question. Normally we do a resolution like that and, I mean, do they carry equal weight? I mean, I'd almost prefer to have something sooner than later, but
So a motion is still an action of this council, which expresses a collective decision, of course. That I would consider the next higher weight, if you will, would be a resolution.
okay.
Because,
Then I'll,
okay.
Councilor Lucis?
Mr. Mayor, just point of clarification, and maybe our city attorney can jump in on this. So I believe that you mentioned that this has to be put forward to the public first, and there has to be public notice. Does that strictly, when it comes to public notice of a potential resolution, is that what has to be presented? Just looking at the agenda now, we didn't disclose that we were going to vote on a potential resolution. It just says in our agenda that there would be a presentation with the potential for public comment to oppose.
Correct. So the agenda, by having those two procedural requirements, you are enabled to take any action from the motion up to resolution or ordinance. My answer to the mayor was, if you would like to defer and actually see the resolution as opposed to some amorphous sign, some endorsement, then yes, it can come back, but you would still just need to put that, we have this resolution, does anybody want to talk about it? That's just a state requirement.
Thank you.
Okay, so to review, we have a motion to endorse on the table, well, not on the table. We have a motion. We have a second that was retracted. Do we have another second, or should we change the conversation to a resolution?
Not seeing a second, I will happily change to directing the city manager to prepare a resolution in endorsement of this.
So resolution in support of Proposition 1 at next week's meeting.
In the consent agenda, yes, thank you.
Just to clarify, okay. Motion and a second. City Attorney?
I apologize. It cannot be in the consent agenda. There still has to be an opportunity for the public comment. I apologize. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
I withdraw that last part about the consent agenda.
All right, so
Thank
just
you,
to clarify,
City
what we
Attorney.
have in front of us is a motion that has been seconded to direct the city manager to prepare a resolution in support of Proposition 1 to appear at our meeting 1 week from today. Any further discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
on that motion, Councilmember Sassen,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Councilmember Culver,
Yes.
Councilmember Lutsis,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes,
With 6 votes in favor, the motion passes.
all right. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation, Chief.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much and for the support and allowing me to address the council.
Of course, anytime. Next on our agenda is the Urban Land Institute Technical Assistance Panel, final report presented by Community Development Director Debbie Bent and Principal Planner Todd Hall for information and discussion. Oh, wow, we have quite the crowd here.
Good evening, Council. So we are very excited this evening to present the final report from the Urban Land Institute Technical Advisory Panel. So we can say ULI TAP if we like acronyms. So we do have a short presentation, and Todd is going to start the presentation and introduce the folks who are with us this evening. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along or ask questions after the presentation. Thank you.
All right, good evening, Council, Mayor, and tonight we're pleased to welcome 3 of our ULI TAP panelists tonight. So on my left is Leslie Bain. She's represents Framework, and we have Donna Moody from the Metro League of Urban League of Seattle. Is that correct? And then we have Carrie Westerbeck, our architect. So tonight we wanted to present to you the final report from the Urban Land Institute Technical Advisory Panel. This was held back in March. And the 3 panelists will each give a little bit of synopsis on 3 categories, and we'll get to that in just a little bit here. So first of all, what is ULI and what is a TAP? So the ULI is the Urban Land Institute. Specifically, this group is the ULI Northwest, and it's a nonprofit real estate and development organization. And ULI isn't just from the Northwest or the United States. It's an international society all around the world. And so specifically in this region, throughout Washington and Oregon, we have 1,100 members, a part of that organization. And really what it is it's to support, connect, build communities through local programs, educational activities, and research. And through this group, they have a service that's called a technical advisory panel. And what this does is they provide comprehensive and strategic advice in response to a specific land use or development assignment. And on some preceding slides, I'll be talking about what those questions were. So in this particular TAP, we had 10 to 15 members. Typically, they're made up of 10 to 15 members. In this case, we had 10 members, and those are the folks that are here on your screen. Of course, Leslie, Donna, and Carrie are here this evening. And then we had a great variety of folks that participated in it. So we had a gentleman, economic development director from the city of Kent. We had Jeff, who represents a large architect firm. Mark, who's a development consultant, very strong, real estate skills. Aaron from Methuen, another well-known architect in the Seattle area. Evan Schneider, Heartland, they're kind of an advisor for land development. Morgan Shook, Eco Northwest, are well-respected economic advisors throughout the Northwest. And then Jess Zimbabwe from Environmental Works, which has done a whole number of projects around the Seattle area. So the ULI experts interviewed 14 community partners representing downtown specifically. And these are various backgrounds from business owners, property owners, and community organizations. So over 2 days in March 6th and 7th, they participated in this TAP exercise. And so we've filled this room as well as a couple others, and they had a number of interviews, short 15, 30-minute interviews with folks. And they gathered a lot of different perspectives and information from the participants. And so it really was a kind of a hands-on thing and getting a true ground truthing experiment from folks here in Kenmore specifically. So the key questions that we were looking for was, how can the city attract investment to make Kenmore residents proud, as well as draw others to Kenmore to share in what it has to offer? And how can the city be made a destination, a place that gives the Kenmore community a reason to stay and spend time? And so with those two kind of overarching questions, we had 4 questions specifically about downtown that we wanted to find out about. So the first one is, how does the city jumpstart or the next phase of our downtown plan? As you all know, the original downtown plan was created back in 2003. All of that has been fully implemented, across the street. We see all the great things that came out of that plan. And now it's time to really start thinking about, what is the next life cycle of this? The second one is, why is the city of Kenmore being left behind with regards to development investment compared to our neighbors, such as Bothell and Woodinville? So we kind of wanted to see, what's going on with our neighbors that we aren't seeing here specifically in Kenmore. The third one is, what tools and partnership opportunities may the city consider to leverage public and private investment in downtown? And then finally, how does the city incentivize and inspire longtime property owners in seeing the vision of downtown Kenmore and allow for redevelopment? This vision for downtown, and this was based on the TAP stakeholder interviews, we came up with this vision that's on the screen. And this is not something that's part of the vision statement. I want to be clear on that. The vision statement is part of the comprehensive plan, but this is kind of a vision that came out of this TAP exercise. So it says, in downtown Kenmore, we envision a bustling hub where small businesses thrive and residents flourish. We dream of vibrant, safe streets alive with diverse shops and activities for young and old, fostering a strong sense of community for all those who call it home, and a memorable experience for visitors. As part of this exercise, we did a SWOT, and I'm sure all of you have heard what a SWOT is: strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and strengths. So the things that the TAP found as some of our strengths is we're a family-friendly community, we're a vibrant, connected community, and we have a great public realm improvements that have been envisioned and created over the last decade. Some of our weaknesses, we have some parking challenges downtown, some walkability challenges. We're working on that, of course. And then some of the aesthetics. We've seen some great improvements on the aesthetics, but that's kind of a work in progress. And then some opportunities. We've got some housing capacity projects that you see that have been built or are still being built just to the north of us. 522 corridor, that's also, of course, a threat because while it also provides a great amount of economic development and opportunities, it also is a challenge for walkability and sense of place. And then the last on the opportunities is public acquisition of land. And then threats to that I didn't mention: auto-oriented nature and small parcels in the downtown areas are difficult to redevelop. So we don't have a lot of, large property owners or a lot of piecemeal things going on. So the area that we drafted is the primary downtown area, which is kind of the core spot that they focused on. But we also wanted to emphasize the expanded downtown area, which is essentially from 68th all the way east past the grocery outlet. I believe that's down by 80th. And so that's section we call the kind of expanded downtown area. And then the Brew Road district, which is just south of 522 along the Burt Gilman Trail. We have a number of new breweries that have been opened there. And so we've kind of identified this as our great opportunity to expand on that in the future. But of course, the main thing that we had the TAP focus on is what we call the bullseye. And that's this primary section that just across the street from City Hall. And that would include the hangar, the town square, Kenmore Camera, all those businesses there. And then all the businesses south of 181st. And so that block right there is our primary focus area that this TAP looked at. So now I'd like to turn it over to the three panelists, and each one of them will be speaking to three of these categories that we've focused on as part of infrastructure. And that would be physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, and economic infrastructure. And the panelists will give a little bit more detail on what each of those means.
So in talking about the social infrastructure, I think it's important to acknowledge that there are a lot of areas that attract the community to interact, to engage, and also attract folks from outside of the community. So in order to build a livelier existence, it's really important to provide a connection. There's a lot of people cycling, walking to activities that would stay for a day or for a longer period of time if there was a greater connection between all of these links. And looking especially at things that are kind of anchors. There's Bastyr University, there's the whole area of where the brewery attracts people, the Burke-Gilman Trail is going through, and it's making people stop on the Kenmore side instead of always being on the Bothell side. Next slide. I think there's also an opportunity to provide wayfinding and business support that will keep the community active once they're in the center of things. So by pointing out some different activities that people can go to, by creating increased activity, making it more of a day visit, I think there's an opportunity here for the small businesses to feel supported by having larger visits, larger money being spent in their establishments, and also keeping the public engaged once they're here. Thinking about programming and placemaking, this is something that can have a huge impact. And I think we've already seen this when there's an activity at the plaza outside of the brewery. Things like nighttime movies, but also think about additional programming that could take place that can attract intergenerational activity for the community. Things like movie nights, things like little pop-up festivals that could happen on the plaza, vendor cycles where there could be an event where people gather in this square and then maybe go out and do something in the community. So lots of opportunity to make this kind of a center or a hub for where activity can be instigated and then continued throughout the rest of the city limits. And I think looking at social infrastructure, we also really saw a great interest in art. There's a strong art community here. There's a lot of people coming for the photo classes and kind of expanding that. So the whole idea of taking that as a seed, kind of planting it and watching it kind of grow and thrive and creating a sense that when people come to Kenmore, they identify with the fact that it's proximity to the lake, that it's good for biking, it's good for walking around. There's a lively art community, also very active education, good for families, and also good for spending a day here and not just passing through.
On the physical side, a lot of what was in the SWOT exercise really came through, that there was a lot of discussion about connections, also a real love of nature. I'm just looking at the green hills over there, the lake, the herons, all that kind of stuff. That's a really beautiful part of the city. It's not one that you really are as aware of as you might be as you go through on 522. This is an image that I really, really like. Miller Hall did it as part of a competition. But you know, how forward thinking, how crazy can we think about really reforesting, bringing green back into the city? You've got a lot of beautiful green and then a whole lot of asphalt. So just, not that we solved it, but real creative thinking about what it can mean. And streets are really interesting. They're different than a park. There's a point source, but streets are a network that can handle stormwater, that can bring greenery in a linear way, that can be habitat. And you're full of streets, as we all are. So next slide. So one of the things that was really intriguing is the idea of a green loop. So these are not sketches that we spent a lot of time on, but I hopefully get the idea across that you've got this sort of the bullseye, as they were saying, but this crisscross of 522 and 68th, and that's not the most gorgeous spot in town. I think that's really something that needs to have something that's the scale of the surroundings, the vehicle scale. What could go there that could really be a game changer so that people would know that Kenmore is more than about the road? I would also say that it's obvious that you're going to have a 522 there because you've got a whole lake before you can go east-west. And it has some really cool stuff on it as a roadhouse. And I think the brewery brings a little bit about that spirit back there. And I think, embrace that and then give yourself a green loop on either side of it. You've already got the Burt Gilman and the lake. I mean, it's fabulous. Swamp Creek is down on one side of it. And a lot of good work that you've done on the town center. But again, if that could be pushed as a green loop that was really about walkability, and it's hard to transfer from being a place like most of us are in America, where it's all about the car, to be where it's all about the people. And, it takes time and it takes perseverance, but just really think as creatively as possible about how we can make that transition, because that's where people are going to want to spend time in your city. So I get really excited about an idea, so I'm just going to put it out there that the idea of crossing 522 is going to take on such importance as Lake Point develops, and really looking forward to what that can be with plans for the park. It was outside of our boundary, but I think it's the elephant, on the other side of the street. So one thing that struck me was that when you can have bridges that aren't something where you have to go up to cross this scary skinny thing looking at cars underneath you and wander back down, if you can have something that is wide and beautiful, we build them for wildlife now. There's beautiful examples, one in Vancouver, Washington, that goes over the highway there. It's an art piece. Even simpler ones that just have a little bit of landscape on the side, make it feel like it's a place. You have this really interesting condition where the library is high. You've got a drop to a city-owned parcel, and you could actually go from the library out to the patio and keep going straight and have this view of the lake and get you to Lake Point. So just think about, again, just really creative thinking that might not be obvious when you're like talking to Metro about getting people across there, that you can have that function, but for a bigger investment, it can be a game changer. It could also be the embodiment of the new Kenmore as a structure. So we did look at some of the things that you've got in the works. This is down on what would be part of that green loop. I think I don't have too much to say about this other than, there's your herons, and thinking about this as creatively as possible, that it still keeps the functions that you need, but can be a part of that green, really creative thinking about the green. This is something that I think is a super interesting graphic. The pink filled in pieces are things you've already done. And the open pink are the city owned or has got some public control to it. So you can start to see those things stitch themselves together. And so the things where you've got some control over what happens, you can start to really get those linkages to happen and hopefully be an inspiration to the property owners that are not, part of what it is that you control. I think the attractive front door where you're going to have the new transit is a really important thing for you to think about what that looks like aesthetically as well as functionally, and working with Metro to make that something that is a real beacon for a beautiful Kenmore. Okay. I'm gonna toss it over.
Okay, thanks, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, there we go. Economic infrastructure, near and dear to my heart. Okay, so we talked about a lot of things. I'll try and cover them well here. Expedited permitting. We're thinking about, you've got, one of the challenges in Kenmore is you don't necessarily have a lot of big parcels left, like you're seeing have get developed almost, chunks of town in Woodinville, a little bit in Bothell, the Totem Lake area. And I think sometimes we hear people, oh, why don't we have that? Well, you don't have these huge parcels to assemble. So what do you do with your small ones? You need to make them attractive to develop to the people who are interested in coming here and working on smaller parcels. They're a whole different animal. Our system and our land use laws and zoning and financing aren't really set up for them. So you're gonna have to have dialogue with developers who may be interested in coming to work and invest in Kenmore. Part of that is, enticements, expedited permitting. Can we make it a little easier for you? You're not gonna be able to get away with anything, but can we make the way smoother for you? Design review, generally, I can't remember how people felt about this, but as an architect, I think it just clogs things up and makes them more expensive. So I would encourage you to keep this administrative. And I know recent legislation has done that already. So maybe that's kind of a moot point. But we've seen in Seattle, it's been a bit of a debacle if you want to get things built. Examining, this is always important, the city fees, utility costs, stormwater management. Again, you don't want to skimp on any of those, but can you
Can you make them payable over time? We're going to get to this, like that, the deferral fee collection, for example. I know over in Bothell, I helped get a very small rule changed where you paid for a particularly large fees at the end, actually when you after your permit was issued, but before you got certificate of occupancy, because that's when the developer has money. They're out of money when they're pulling their permit. So it's just kind of thinking about what makes it easier for people to come here and do business and make it attractive to work in Kenmore. If you want to start to work with those smaller parcels, it's big parcels too. Well, these ideas will help with those as well. So incentivization as well. Again, being a city that says, sure, you got to follow the rules, but we welcome you. We want to work with you. We have a vision for our downtown. We're eager to talk to you. We really want to make Kenmore a better place. Come build here. Come talk to us. You know, we can work with you. I think it's Lakewood down in Tacoma literally has been saying that message as a city for years now. I'm not sure how it's going down there. I haven't checked in, but I have seen that that's part of their marketing as a city. Come live here, build here. It's pretty cool. Invest in yourself. So this is, I remember, so I was in Kenmore for 11 years. I love this place, but now I'm next door in Bothell. And you guys started talking more and more about your little mini business districts like the brewery district and everything. Well, we're saying grab that, go with it, find wonderful, unique little things about Kenmore that no one else has that people are coming here for. And the hangar, for example, I know just a little tangent. People from the cities all around here, you probably hear this too, always say, oh, we love to go to the hangar. They don't live in Kenmore, but they come to the hangar because they love it. So anyway, the brewery district is similar. I ride bikes and people are like, oh, let's meet up at the 192 or whatever, because it's a destination. And so build on that, hang more on that, make more of it, make it easy, make it safe, make it connected to all the things we've talked about here as well. And so you've got these little diamonds in the rough that you can polish. And so these things have unique character. You know, sometimes maybe it's a building from the 40s and 50s is not too interesting, but with creative people in the building trades and architecture and planning and people like here at this table, you can do some pretty great things with some mundane buildings and planning and making spaces for people. Business improvement area, I forgot what that was, but I know other cities do that, whether there'll be an area they focus on, or what was that, maybe the tax program where they tax themselves
And then
to improve the area?
maintenance is wrapped into it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. We talked about hiring a business and arts and services coordinator to really focus on these things, to again, put you on the map and capitalize on those strengths and make them more broadly understood by the larger regional community that you want to attract to Kenmore. And then I like this a lot, be a city on the lake, not just by the lake. One word, right? But own it, you're on the lake. And eventually you'll have Lake Point, there'll be something be there, whether it's buildings or parks and other areas, maybe who knows what happens to premix. Development agreements. This is again, finding ways to work with developers to come to a mutual agreement. How can we make Kenmore better for the people who want to build here and take that risk, but also the city gets something out of it. So, very common way for cities to move forward with bigger, more ambitious projects. And then, part of that is identifying the strategic parcels, support them, figure out what they might need. What are the roadblocks to making those part of a wonderful, walkable, people-oriented city that you've got in your vision for the city. And then, again, ask what they need, what's missing, what's in the way. I think you'll get the development community to, really come to the table and talk to you about those things very easily if you, again, come with a cooperative, open arms sort of approach. Sounds great. Debbie.
Thank you. So what do we do with this report? So it was wonderful to have these experts come to the city and spend 2 days here. And I want to emphasize, it was 2 days. They have a high level of expertise, but they were not doing a thorough deep dive into everything. This was kind of giving a perspective from the expertise level. So these were suggested actions, tools, or partnerships that the city could take to consider for the next phase. So when we're looking at an implementation measure and we're currently updating the downtown element of the comprehensive plan, an implementation measure would be to develop the next phase of downtown development, whether that's a business strategy for downtown, economic strategy, whatever that would be. So we now need to do something to implement what the vision would be for downtown. And we're probably going to do that as a phased approach, maybe focusing on that bullseye area as the first phase. So it's really up to the city to determine what we will do for that next phase of development. What strategy will we focus on, and how will we relate that to the broader downtown area? So I think the ULI report is a great starting point for the city to begin that next discussion for a future work program for what will be the next phase of downtown development, and what implementation measures and how are we going to implement it. So again, thank you very much for the panelists for attending this evening, and would like to open up to council for questions.
Questions, Councilmember Shrubnik.
I love this. I read it and I felt like a kid in a candy store. I literally wanted to do everything. So for someone like me, and in particular, the wayfinding and the green loop and the reforesting, those particularly resonated for me. I've been actually talking about wayfinding for a while myself. And it seems like a relatively low cost, high value strategy. But my question for the kid in the candy store is, what if you were in our seat and you wanted to pick the 2 or 3 highest value, and that's cost and impact put together, items from your menu, what would you pick? And that's across all 3 areas.
I would say you need to connect and to have a presence, a beautiful presence on 522. And I think one thing I would suggest is that you look for things that are opportunities that if you miss them, you just missed them. So if Metro is going to add stuff on 522, I think you should be all over partnering with them to make it say Kenmore, say what you wanted to say. So I think that would be the first one. Look for moments of opportunity and partnering.
And I think to echo on what Leslie said, something like the bridge might seem like an extravagance, but if you time it with the coming of increased transit, and you think about how many people kind of drive by and don't stop, creating something that makes it more attractive, that makes it accessible via public transportation, and says to people, you can enjoy this area without a car. You can actually cross this bridge and be in this environment, enjoy art, enjoy the breweries, safe cycling, and actually spend some dollars in our town. I think you would get that back over a series of years, and also create this environment that felt green, that could also attract people from far away, and become a place that for people visiting would think, I would like to spend some time in Kenmore today, and also for people that are finding Seattle too expensive to live in, other areas, maybe Kirkland's too expensive, and maybe they can find some of the new developments able to house them, and also live in an enjoyable kind of urban environment as it's created.
Thank you. And if people could speak to a couple of topics that are not the bridge, we've done extensive and repeated investigations of bridges, and we will probably do it again based on this. But I mean, including getting state fundings to do it. So this is not a new topic. So I would love to hear a couple of ideas beyond the bridge.
I do want to chime in and say I'm a fan of the wayfinding that you guys discussed, because being a local and someone who does ride the trail pretty regularly, I've had friends who I thought for sure would know about the hangar. I brought that up. No, they had no clue. They've ridden the trail. They didn't know it was there and they were a block away. I've talked to at least 3 people. I know it's not a lot, but like it's sort of a sample, right? And I was like taken aback, like, you don't know the hangar's there? And I'm so used to it being there, right? And I know about it and I meet people there. So I thought the low hanging fruit, wayfinding, signage, stuff on the trail. I know Bothel's got a couple of things, Redmond, Woodinville, they all have some signage, right? Just point people there. Get permission from King County, whatever I guess it takes, but like literally like there's stuff there, go over there, go patronize the businesses or go to the hangar or whatever. And I know we discussed that a little bit, but just kind of that, you know, some of you know about Strong Towns. In fact, there was a presentation here 5 years ago this summer. And they talked about the, you know, do the little things, the easy, cheap things that you maybe don't think matter, but they usually add up. And so I just want to add that.
I'd like to maybe add to just focus on programming a little bit, because once the different areas get known for the activities that they have, then people begin to look for things to be occurring there. And so many of the activities really just take some ideas and some thoughts, could maybe support small businesses by moving some kind of a vendor Saturday outdoors, have like an art fair where people that are creators in the neighborhood, makers, are able to share their wares and start attracting people from other areas. And once that area is programmed, it becomes exciting and people begin to look for it. And it attracts not just the local residents here, but people from outlying areas, and also maybe a little tourism in the summer, especially given the proximity to the lake for the activities. It's not just a one-stop for an event, but it's maybe a day that you can spend with a picnic, you know, maybe a little cycling and the activity that's been programmed.
Yeah, I think what Donna was saying about the art and the love for art, if art is kind of leading the wayfinding, that can be a lot more effective than just a sign. Maybe you need the sign too, but something that is a little almost startling. It's like, oh, I wonder what's over there. You know, how do you kind of spark people's imagination that they might want to turn the corner and find the hangar or find, you know, your beautiful parks on the river and then on the lake.
I do still want to speak to economic if we've got a minute or two. Anyway, because that was my piece, but since I sort of, you know, I'm in those trenches, I would, it's going to take planning time, but it's sort of free to say, how can we start to put together a package as a city that says, we want to work with you, we want to be an attractive place, and start to think about the things you can do to get those parcels noticed and make yourself more attractive than the next town. And there are ways to do that. You know, maybe hey, we're gonna explore our shared parking so you can get more, you know, retail or mixed use or density or housing together, but they share a parking lot nearby, because I know parking is a big issue. We're not going to stop driving in real soon, but at the same time, the places that are becoming economically economic powerhouses are places that are making places for people to make community where they feel safe, when their kids are running around, they're not going to get hit by a car or whatever. They have plazas, they have the fountains, whatever that may be. Those are expensive things. Talk to your building official and your planning staff about how can we say we're a place that you should come build that here. And what are you going to do to make yourself just a little more attractive? And there are probably a lot of different ways to do that. You can workshop. I'm not going to go through a litany today, but you just got to make yourself a little more attractive to the next place, so that someone, like, for example, the example right now is all the nerds like me or in planning and architecture and stuff. We're geeking out about Spokane. Check out what Spokane is doing. They're going crazy trying to make themselves attractive, to build housing and make places for people to love and to live. So you just got to make yourself stand out. And it's by doing all the things we're talking about, but then also just technically how you can make it a little easier to come here to build that housing you're talking about, or do some of the council priorities and things like that. What do you have maybe that Bothell can't offer, or Kirkland can't offer, Lake Forest Park or Seattle? Next.
Councilor Culver.
Thank you. Enjoying this report. Appreciate all this. This gathering obviously happened shortly after we had a big development effort that resonates a lot with what's mentioned here, right? Affordable housing, development agreements, big investments coming in, working with developers, et cetera. I guess I would just sort of open-endedly ask, like, you all watching this happen maybe, or shortly after this happened, we hear some reactions in the report, and we hear, you know, mentions of the Shell property. It's listed as a threat, which is interesting. I just wondered if you all could expand on that. Like, what was your all's takeaway sort of watching this shortly after it happened and knowing that you all have the experience of not being on the council side, but being, you know, closer to other parts of that?
I think Councilman Colby is referring to the Plymouth Housing Project. So the team was not tasked with coulda, shoulda done something different. They were kind of coming in to look at this as what would be the next phase of downtown and figuring out ideas and options. So they were not assessing a deep dive of any regulations or any prior projects that had occurred or hadn't occurred, is my answer.
I guess I did have one thought about that, which was, you know, I'm sure it was unfortunate that all of that happened, but wondering if that's the best place for housing. It's a pretty busy arterial, and you know, I think a lot of what we've done regionally is put people who can't afford other choices on arterials, and you know, maybe that's a different kind of front door for the city, given that you know the property is available again, as I understand it, and it is city owned. So you know, I think again, putting a strong face on 522 and something that really is appropriate for that kind of roadhouse, you know, history is just a thought.
I think I would just chime in and say too, when we embrace density as a solution, the first few examples of it often seem out of place. And as we get a little bit more and we see the benefits that come along with it, it begins to feel different. It feels like it fits in a little bit better. And I think that could maybe be how we can address part of what we witnessed. I think if that was a component along with other components, it wouldn't stand out quite as much. And I think it also shows a willingness to kind of shoulder the burden of housing that we're having in the region, that it's not a city that's experiencing it or a particular county or area. It's really something that our region, along with the rest of the country, is experiencing. And so to solve it, to resolve for it, we have to do it as larger communities and not think of ourselves as a singular community that's being asked to take something on, but think of ourselves as a component of many communities that will solve some larger problems.
Deputy Mayor?
First, like other council members, I'm really impressed with the work that you brought forward. Like Councilmember Srebnick, really excited about the greening of the city. I think that's incredibly important. And I liked having even a visual just to keep the thoughts going. Sorry for opening up the bridge again, but I loved the idea of creating a green bridge and a landmark and a destination bridge that may be different than something that's been seen before. So my brain kind of went wild on that little, not too wild, but like I kind of, I see now maybe it could be very much worth the investment, something spectacular and bigger, you know. So I liked that. Between the two were there two bridge locations or three that you pointed out on the presentation? I saw two for sure.
There's really one in the core area that we were looking at.
The one further.
By 68th, yeah.
Yeah, this one here. Okay, I was just wondering if there was one that was more because you mentioned the one by the library, I think is the other. So yeah, I'm feeling this here too, and somehow hoping to connect it to the bike path and all that we've already invested. And pointing to I heard, I think, a couple of points, and Carrie, I think, really brought it up, and it related back to a presentation, I think last year or the year before, about when we look at that bullseye, which I think we as a council have to just choose, where are we gonna go? Because I like the grab the low hanging fruit, artful wayfinding and that sort of thing. But where we start the bullseye and how we focus on it, I'm hearing we need 522 to be welcoming people into our downtown core. That feels like a really important thing to do. And so I think staff and we as a council can go back and start coming up with some creative solutions. I also think that idea of marketing Kenmore as a livable place, live and create or live in, something, I haven't been able to, it was build and create here or something along those lines, that we have that message and we're calling it, because how are we going to call people here? It's nice to market ourselves with that. And I know we have love where you live and some really wonderful slogans here, but driving it towards that economic development angle, I think is important. So I like that that was called out. Yeah, I appreciated having a reiteration of the importance of our 522 entry into both sides of Kenmore, but a lot here because we have more businesses on this side right now that need attention and landmarks that can be visited. Hearing that people don't see Stoop or our town square kind of connected, how important that corridor is. And I think it was Rod Stevenson or someone who was here a couple of years ago talking about that. So I'm not going to belabor this. I appreciate the work. It's so fun to have some creativity, but for us to have like direction, look at the bullseye like that, I can orient to and I can feel it. So thank you.
I just want to say that you guys have done some really bold moves that I think have paid off, partly by acquiring some property where you needed to do that so that you could control the quality of development and get yourself a hangar and a beautiful city hall and a beautiful library. And I think you have clues that you can take from yourself about what has worked. And I think a bold action gets a bold result. And, it's nice to have some smaller things. And I think art can really do that in a temporary way, but that can test how some bigger moves can happen in the future.
Yeah, thank you. It's I think that one of the things that this council since the city's inception has run into is the ability to buy those big swaths of land, or I think it's incredibly important that we find a way to bring developers to see the opportunity here that the city is going to support those larger investments. Because we actually really need to find a path to saying these properties need to be used for the highest, greatest good for our community. And this is how we're going to get there. Whether it's private or public, getting that going, it's a big deal. There are a lot of important businesses that are there that probably don't want to move, right? So like, how do we work together for the highest, greatest good for all? It's important thing to think about. So thank you.
Councilor Sassen.
I too find this very exciting. You have left me with a sort of a glossary of terms to pique my imagination. My husband and I like to joke that when we moved here 20 plus years ago, what we saw, not just on our property, but in the town, was potential. And I have to say that I think that we're a community that is divided, that our long-term residents are comfortable with the idea of having potential and uncomfortable with the idea of change. And our new residents are thrilled about the possibility of what we could make happen. And just like 522, just like the bridge, just like the river coming through, we have some divisions in our community. And I think it's our job to help bridge those things. But again, the concepts that you have left us with in terms of all three categories, really, the social infrastructure and the physical infrastructure and the economic infrastructure, I appreciate the ways of thinking about those three things, and the way that you three wove them together is impactful for me. I think one of the things that we struggle with here in Kenmore that Woodinville and Bothell have been very successful at is accessing the water for both public and development. And our water is industrial at this time, and we are not in control of that. And it's not without frustration. In terms of bridges, I felt really inspired by, I love that bridge at Totem Lake. I just think that bridge is remarkable. And, I think of other bridges like the lid over 90 on Mercer Island, and even the downtown, the cement and green bridge. I mean, it's a park built over the highway, which is a remarkable thing. So there are options in terms of a green loop and bridging. And I really appreciated your, Donna, your articulation of density, and we have to start somewhere. And the first thing is always going to be awkward. And I just appreciated your articulation of that. Thank you very much.
Councilor Shrubnik?
I just have one more quick question. So your focus question number 4, which is how do you engage existing property owners? This is something that I've struggled with and brought up many, many times, and we've talked about as a council and with staff. What would you say in terms of the highest value strategy? How do we do that? How do we actually engage reluctant, for whatever reason, property owners who we really want to share the vision with us, how this could be exciting for them and us?
Go for it. Yeah.
I wrestle with this too, because I'm in Bothell, where we would like people on Main Street to develop their buildings. In fact, staff and council 5, 6, 7 years ago, when they rebuilt Main Street and got a bunch of grants, that was the whole idea, was to catalyze some density there. And there is not much has happened, so there's some disappointment around that. But I know you had a presentation from Urban 3 a few years ago, and Bothell actually paid for an initial study. But one of the impactful things that they and another company called Verdinity, which that also does the land use financial analysis, found is, much like what Donna said, you're gonna have some awkward stuff at first, but density really supercharges your tax base and brings you money to, whether it's for fire trucks or fire stations, like you talked about earlier, plazas, parks, programming, et cetera, et cetera. So most people love a thriving downtown, a thriving business district. So you'll bring business to the existing building owners and business owners by bringing more business and being business friendly and being open to densifying certain areas. And you have to define what that is for Kenmore, but that's I know in other cities I've heard similar conversations, and they'll have a consultant come in and say, some people think if you only have 3 restaurants and you invite another 3 in, it's going to be bad. Well, actually, what they found is it enhances that for each restaurant, has that much more business and brings more people in. They have more choices. They want to go to that spot because they have 6 to choose from instead of 3. So that would be at least one plank I would be mining in that respect is, don't we all want to be more prosperous? Well, more business and a little more development downtown, which is inevitable anyway. So you're going to do it sooner or later. It could be good for existing businesses and business owners. There are probably more, but that's one that comes to mind.
Think a little bit too about what type of development. So if you always are building, apartment buildings, rentals that are studios and 1-bedrooms, you attract a certain type of resident. If you have mixed unit sizes and suddenly begin to have 2 and 3 bedrooms for families that can't yet afford to purchase a home, but are looking for a place that they feel comfortable raising a family, and you start to see those apartment buildings have a little bit more activity and liveliness besides just an attraction to nightlife, I think you suddenly can impact how your city, how your neighborhoods respond to the density and the development that's coming. And then as contract with developers, you start to ask for amenities. We love that you want to build 60-unit building here, but we also want a green space in it. We want something that is an amenity for the residents as well as the people that live in those units. So you begin to have things where there's more interaction, more engagement, more neighborhood and community building, and suddenly the impact feels less about a new, apartment complex, but more about the beautiful walkway that comes along with it. And I think you just kind of hold your ground when you're inviting developers to do work here because they would like to do the work here, but you can set the parameters for how the work will be conducted and what kind of contract you will have with them.
And I'll clarify my question a little bit more. We have some property owners in the downtown, business owners. Those are the folks that I was talking about. So I'm curious your thoughts on how do we engage them in being open to redevelopment. I think Carrie was close to that question. And I'm just.
I totally
yeah.
understand what you're asking. I just don't have any really good answers. I've been
Gotcha.
wrestling with this one for years. I hate to say it.
I do think a little bit about the type of building that they saw go in, because when we were interviewing different property owners, something they said was it seemed like the apartments were just for the people that would be there for a year, moving on, really only interested in nightlife, and they weren't really engaging in the community. And you might find the unit size having some impact. We're not going to change, minds overnight, but also that coupled with increased revenue that might come from more people engaging in the neighborhood. It might be a very slow trickle that it takes to, change their minds. But I think if they can see things, they might be maybe a little bit more open.
Yeah, it is a real problem. I mean, the way that we're set up, a property owner can do what the property owner wants as long as it's in the regulatory realm that you guys do have some control over, right? Not entirely. And it lives within an economic system. But a lot of people just don't want to develop. They don't want to sell. Maybe their families owned it for a long time. I don't know the particular situation. But let me just say that you've got more, carrots than you have a lot of sticks that you're probably willing to use. You do have some property that you have control over. I mean, you have to look at what you can control. And then hopefully it will influence even the most retractable property owners over time. But, I don't know this particular situation, but you can't necessarily talk somebody into do something they don't want to do. So I think look at what you have control over, do a great job of it, keep doing a great job of it, and, wait them out, you got to outlast them. I know it might not be the answer you want, but.
Yeah, I want to, I agree with my colleagues. I really appreciate all the work that went in this. It was very thoughtful. It really got a lot of gears spinning in my head. And a particular interest to me, I really enjoyed the idea of the green loop, getting more ways for folks to be able to walk and bike throughout Kenmore, I think is important and could tie together some neighborhoods in a way that they aren't quite tied together yet, which I think is great. And I've gone through waves as far as the bridge idea goes, excitement and then not. And I think looking at this report again, and then I was just looking at Google Maps and seeing kind of how things connect. And I do think we need to figure out a way to connect this side of downtown with the Burke-Gilman in a way that makes sense. Because right now, I don't know what Carrie's experience is, but my experience, if I'm trying to get onto the Burke-Gilman or if I'm trying to get off the Burke-Gilman, it's a whole 6-stage process with a lot of crossing of streets and all sorts of stuff. And it's really uncomfortable. And it did have me looking at the satellite image, trying to picture maybe a bridge that would go across and then maybe have 2 forks off, one north, one south or something, because we're going to have that connection at some point anyway, if anything's going to happen at Lake Point. But also we just need a connection to the Burke-Gilman Trail to this side of the city, because that's something that's been lacking for a long time. The only downside is, we're talking probably $30 million at the end of the day. Just throwing spaghetti at the wall, but that's my guess for what something like that would run, give or take a few million one way or the other. But it is something that's essential to the city at some point. I'd also, just to put this idea for my colleagues too, we also are going to have to figure out how cars are connected over to Lakeside. And one idea I've had since it's already there would be working with WashDOT to add a signalized intersection at 65th. There already is a street on the other side, and it's way cheaper than doing a underpass or something like that. But anyway, I just want to appreciate all the thoughtfulness that went into this. I'm gonna have to look at it again in a few months to kind of solidify some things, but I really got excited about the ideas around a green loop, and And maybe it's just because a lot of that route is a route that I walk on a pretty regular basis. And it'd be a lot easier and a lot prettier if we made some of those investments. But I think it could really tie together some neighborhoods and tie together the city in a way that it hasn't quite been connected yet. So any other questions?
I was just going to say one thing in response to, I think, Deborah's first question, which are some easy pieces. And it seems like people really like the green loop. And you could have that be a thing. You know, you could put green loop art around it and say, this is the green loop, and just name it and grow into it. But it's already mostly there. So that would be a really easy thing to do with an art program, Art on Trails, and claim it.
And the wayfinding was another inexpensive, maybe though, you know, you were asking for the easier first steps, maybe those two things and one more.
No, I was gonna say, and the art idea was great. Look at that weird, cool sculpture, whatever, and oh, it says go across, safely cross 522 here. You know, see for more. But yeah, the green loop. Because I'm your Bothell guy now, right? So I'm just thinking about. So first of all, I got to tell you, they're proposing ideas for bridges across 522 to connect downtown Bothell with Bothell Landing Park. And so these concurrent conversations going on, and everybody knows how pie in the sky it is. But anyway, it's happening there too. But I also want to say, like, no one really uses them much anymore, but there was a period, but 15, 20 years ago, where there was the town gown loop with UW Bothell and stuff. Anyway, your green loop could start to become a thing. You know, you do some cheap paint and maybe plant a few extra trees if there was some CIP budget or something like that. Start to do it, and then lead walks. Nigel leads one or whatever. Like Friday night on July, whatever, is green loop night, walk night, and we're going to do it for the first time. Then we're going to do it again in 2 weeks, whatever. So make it a programming thing. And, you know, get people out, and they can stop on the way and grab a drink after they're done or whatever at 192 or something, but start to kind of, like, you know, get it worn in.
Love it. Any further questions? City Manager.
We're just really fortunate to have these experts come and descend on our city for 2 days. I couldn't believe it. We're so fortunate, and just want to thank you three plus all of your colleagues that came and helped us over those 2 days. And Todd, thank you for initiating this and getting the grant to help pay for this. It's a big deal, and it's going to help us a lot. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. It is 9:17. If there's no objection, I would propose that we take a quick 10-minute recess, come back at 9:27. Everybody good with that? Please. Kenmore City Council is returning to session. Next item on the business agenda, council priorities for 2025 to 2026, defining what success will look like, presented by City Manager Rob Carter-Lindsay and team.
Thank you, Your Honor. At your city council retreat in April, you let us know what your top goals are for the upcoming biennium. So starting in 2025 and 2026. And then at your June 24th city council meeting, you formally adopted those priorities for 25 and 26. So that's what we're here to talk about tonight is now that you've established those priorities, what does success look like in the 25-26 biennium? In other words, what are the deliverables you'd like to see? Because this is really important as we're preparing the budget this summer so we can know what we can expect to include in the budget. And this is actually the first time we're doing this, where we're having a deeper conversation with you on what success looks like for each goal. Now, let me clarify one thing. I don't want to confuse this with 2024's goals. That's already in motion and that's happening. And in October, you'll do my performance evaluation. It will be based on this year's 2024 goals. Tonight's not about that. Tonight's about the goals for the next biennium, which you adopted on June 24th. So I'm going to assume that you've read this, and then that might speed up the presentation if I can live with that assumption. All right, so I have the preamble, which you also adopted, talking about our, always fulfilling our core mission. And then what you see here is what we as staff think we can do for each one of the 9 priorities in the upcoming biennium. And the focus is really about what we're already doing and what we already plan on doing. So a lot of this, if not all of this, shouldn't really be a surprise to you. And the focus is on existing resources because the tight budget that we have that we're working with. And it's important to try to stay within our means. And so we're focusing on what we can do with existing resources. What you'll notice in this document is that whenever a certain item needs additional resources, you'll see bolded language saying so, okay? So again, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but you can see the climate action plan and all the things we're planning on doing there. Also along all the things that we're doing with environmental stewardship, including the culvert work and the habitat restoration work we're doing. Priority 2 talks about affordable housing. And again, this is all things you have seen before. We are going to have the conversation around permanent supportive housing and other affordable housing types next year when we update our housing strategy plan. And then your new priority, which also made the top 5, is human services. And the main focus is getting that strategic plan done and then implemented. Note that depending on what's in the strategic plan, we might need additional resources and staffing for that. On economic development, number one thing I've always believed is run a good city. That's the very first thing you can do in promoting economic development. But we have a series of other things listed here as well. And then priority number 5 is shorthand, I call it the Target Zero goal for pedestrian and bicycle safety. And you can see these projects that will be either constructed or in design in the next biennium, and all the things we do on a routine basis to promote pedestrian and bicycle safety. And then you can see here on Lake Point what the plan is, and it really is dependent right now on negotiations with the seller. But if that project takes off, we'll need some additional resources for that. Priority number 7, broadening community engagement and fostering fun. We are going to be working on a fully holistic community engagement policy and plan that Lauren Homiak's going to be working on, and you can see these other things that we are already doing. Priority 8 is implementation of the DEIA strategic plan. And in 2026, towards the end of 26, we'll need to update that 5-year roadmap and the strategic plan. And then the last priority is exploring opportunities to expand parks and recreation. And we are actually supposed to update the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan per state law by 2026. So that's kind of a snapshot of all those priorities and things we think we can get done with existing resources in the upcoming biennium. Thoughts, reactions?
Councilor Sherbrooke?
Yes, what Councilmember Sassen did. It's fantastic. I think this is great. I actually would like to go through section by section, but I mean, if nobody else has appetite for that, that's fine. On the first two sections, the first section in particular, you know, again, I would like to see this 2025, 2026 set of items aligned to our climate action plan. I would like to actually have that be something that is a deliverable. So I think that would be, we did talk about that. We also talked about, and I don't know whether it's in transportation or economic development. We did talk about doing a trails map. So I'm hoping that will be a deliverable as well. That one, it was a little unclear at the retreat whether that would take additional resources or not. So those are the things I would call out. And then the third thing is something we talked about on the phone. I think some of these goals actually do have metrics that could be put to them. I know we've talked about, the climate action plan. Certainly a metric is actual reduction in measured greenhouse gas emissions. And I think we've talked about that on the council as well. Certainly a metric for housing is housing units at the different levels of affordability. And even irrespective of whether we have a particular end state or number of units or that we're actually looking for, I think starting to measure those things and looking at our progress could be useful. So I would wonder whether we could come up with a simple set of metrics for these goals.
Your Honor, can I? Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I think it's good to measure them, recognizing that we don't have full control on whether we can reach them, like housing units, for example. We are at the mercy of developers and investors and that sort of thing, but it's still, I think, important to measure that. Same with economic development. I think there's some measures when it comes to economic development that we can use, like new businesses coming into the city and things like that. So I like that idea and happy to do it.
Other questions, comments, thoughts? Councilmember Culver.
Thank you, Mayor. Number 6, this is maybe zooming in too in the weeds, but it seemed to be worded in a way that says like if there's, it's a little farther down, right? Yeah, and assuming an agreement, including testing. I don't know that this is the place for it, and I don't know that we've had sort of a formal discussion about it as council, but is there just no way to get that testing up front? Like can't we make that sort of a, to use a word, like a non-negotiable? Maybe that's too sensitive to talk about here, but that's something the community has asked for, and I guess seems like a question worth posing, so yeah.
Yeah, for me, it is a non-negotiable prior to purchasing the property, yeah.
Okay. Does that also extend to prior to signing an agreement?
I don't know how to do that prior to signing an agreement. The property owner would want to know what our plan is, what our intent is before agreeing to allowing for testing. And I wouldn't want to spend city dollars or state dollars or whatever on testing when I don't know I have the commitment of the property owner. That could be a waste of money.
Okay, that's all I got. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
I just want to tie into Councilmember Shregnick about aligning our priorities to the cap. And when Councilmember Culver brought up item priority number 6, just how do I say? I genuinely see that project as directly aligning with the cap. And so just kind of calling attention to the environmental work that is required there fits very neatly within that top priority of our council. But yeah, I think Councilmember Shrebnick brought it up, but I more than once over the years, I just want to bring up this thing that I brought up. Things like stormwater and actions like that fit into our cap too. So if we can align to like our current business that has to fit within that and have that be visible in our metrics would be wonderful. Thank you.
Councilor Sassen?
Along similar lines, I was so impressed with Mr. Oppenheim's presentation of the DEIA, the program. What am I trying to say? That is used such that every department, every individual has easy access to how to apply that as the lens to their work. And I wonder if there's, and I highly value that. And I wonder if there's a way to use a similar tool to put a climate and environmental lens on all the decisions that we make as a city. I'm not expecting you to answer that. It's really just a question.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Shubnik?
Just a quick one. I think you said verbally, but I don't see it in here on the housing one that we are going to get to the permanent supported housing. It's not technically middle housing, so I just want to make sure we're clear that we're going to get to that. We have to, we're required to, but yeah.
I can find it here. Yeah, there it is, number 5. Including regulations for PSH. Yep.
One thing that we haven't done yet that we're overdue to do that ties in with this section, I think, is actually figuring out the mobile home ordinances for the downtown area. We gave folks a 10-year window. When was that? 5 or 6 years ago at this point? Yeah.
2019, I believe.
2019. So 5 years ago. We're halfway there and we still haven't started work on what we want the future of those parks to look like, and also what we want the protections to be for folks who are currently living at those parks. That is something that needs to be added to a future docket at some point. It does tie in with affordable housing. So I don't know where that fits in here, but we are getting a little late on addressing that one, unless we're going to really push it down to years 8 and 9 to start that work. So
what I suggest is, you have your docket document that you review at the retreat every year, and then you adopt right after the retreat. We could put that on the list in the docket, and then at the retreat, you can tell us where you'd like it to go in the priority of things. Maybe not.
So after the ordinance was adopted to create that mobile home park zone, it was appealed. And we're still in an appeal. So we cannot do anything until that appeal has been resolved, which takes time. So while the clock is ticking, it isn't really ticking because that 10 years really hasn't started. So it will appear on a future docket once the several appeals have been resolved, which will likely take a couple more years, I would imagine, or perhaps longer.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the reminder there. Even though we talk about those appeals on a regular basis, I think it's a good reminder and a good piece of context. Thank you. Councilor Lutzis.
I know one thing that I brought up, I think, Mr. Mayor, you heard this, just to, it's a specific project, but it has to do with the removal of the pilings off the log boom pier. Those are most likely creosote treated, which is unhealthy. And, at least from what I've seen, there's a lot of kids swimming around there, especially during the summertime. And so I know that is a specific project itself. And I know, these items have been brought up or thought through in terms of in you and your staff's creation of the current budget. Is there any way to maybe put another thing that might be almost like a little bit of a catch-all, where if other projects, grant opportunities, partnerships arise that allow for environmental remediation, that we can sort of seize those opportunities? I don't know if this is the right place to put this, but I'm sort of curious what your feedback is. I mean, I appreciate everything that's here right now, but if there's a way to catch other things that pop up along the way too.
Yeah, that would have to be a new capital project that we'd have to think about allocating staff resources to. Normally, we like new ideas like that to be brought up at the retreat. Another thing about creosote pilings, I've been dealing with them for many years now, is it's usually something you actually want to get credit for when you're doing something else. So for example, when we put in the new dock at Log Boom Pier, we did take out a couple of what they call dolphins. There were some pilings sticking out of the water to the east of the pier. And as mitigation for putting in that new dock, we yanked out those dolphins or those creosote pilings. And so I'm thinking about, like, when we do Lake Point development or something like that, I can see that as a future mitigation measure for work done at Lake Point.
Of course, yeah. And again, I realize that this is relatively recent of an idea, so that I don't want to press this upon what you've brought before us. I was just sort of curious about what would fit best with your schedule. So I'm happy to hold off, and maybe we can look at that, at ways and opportunities, if it's through Lake Point or whatever. So that's perfectly fine.
I looked at a map of the city, where the city boundaries are. Our city boundary actually ends at the edge of our pier. And so most of those pilings don't appear to be in the city limits, but that's really not any help, because that means they're in King County, and King County will never do anything about them. So I think if we wanted something done about those, we'd have to take matters into our hands. So,
all right, thank you for your response. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we do know that they at once posed a hazard. So we had our former parks project manager, Rob Sarah McCord, put up a couple of warning buoys right around those. So.
Any further questions, comments? I appreciate this, Rob. This is a different way of going about this sort of work. And it's really helpful to see everything actually spelled out ahead of time, instead of just reading about it in your end of your evaluation letter, where you talk about how everything lined up with our priorities. So this is kind of doing it the other way, which I think is great. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, next on the agenda, staff reports, update on Twin Springs Park project presented by Community Development Director Debbie Bent.
So I provided a memo in your packet which gave a lot more detail. But what I'm really looking for is direction on what to do with Twin Springs Phase 1. And this has been a capital improvement project for several years. It's been challenging, to say the least, to try and work through the permit process. We did receive a state appropriation back in 2019. We have not executed a contract with the city, with the Department of Commerce, due to the uncertainty of whether we would be even able to get permits. So given the challenges with permits that we've had, given the amount of cost increase it has, we were sort of determining whether the benefits of proceeding with this project outweighed the costs. And from a staff perspective, we would recommend putting a halt to any further work on the project that we have been working on for the last several years, and to scale down the efforts to look at sort of refurbishing that south parking lot with some minor park amenities. And talking to the operations, Jennifer Gordon, she feels that those improvements could be done for around $20,000. The unknown question is whether we could get a further amendment of the scope on that state appropriation to refine the scope down to that to $20,000. That is unknown. If we can get that approved, then that would be the funding source. If we can't, then it would be out of the operations budget for public works. So that is, in a nutshell, the issue and recommendation, and happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Councilor Shrubnik?
Yeah, I'm wholly in support of just refurbishing the parking to be ADA, but I'm wondering if one of the additional, and now I read this a while ago and now I'm trying to find it, but it feels like if we're just doing that, it's sort of like a parking lot for what? And is there a minimum piece of access that we could include? For example, I think it was a gravel path, there it is, the construction of the 170 linear foot compacted gravel pathway. You know, just to say we've opened it up. I mean, it's just, not the rest of it that would be, you know, stormwater and, you know, all this intensive stuff, but, you know, could we do anything in there?
The challenge of doing anything on the north end of the park is getting permission from King County. Even a gravel trail generates stormwater, so we'd still have to figure that out. We'd still have to reach agreement with King County on where that stormwater would be dispersed to, and reach agreement on an amended easement agreement to access that trail area. So I think what we're saying is, with all the challenges of doing anything in that area, that's why we'd want to focus on that, on the south end parking lot, which then officially then would allow that park to be open to the public. People could walk there. There would be limited parking there, and we would do limited parking amenities there. If in the future we decided we wanted to do more, whether it would be adding a trail at that south end, we could do that as a separate project. But I think it would just be hard to just scale something back on that north end without still facing all the challenges.
So it's where the trail is that is the problem. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of even doing parking improvements if there's no there. I don't, why would anyone go there? I mean, there's no access to it, is what I'm saying.
At the south end, there is an existing parking area that's there right now. So
right, but there's no
There's no trail. You're
Yeah,
absolutely,
exactly.
no, there isn't. So I think what we're saying is, at least for this phase, that's what we'd like to do, is just concentrate on getting that parking area open so people can get to the park, arrive at the park, walk through it. You're right, there would not be a trail. If we wanted to focus on, can we build a trail from that parking area some distance, then we could. It would just kind of open up now having to sort of redesign things. So I'm saying it would not preclude doing that in the future. But I think this would meet council's desire to officially get that park open with the minimum improvements necessary. In terms of the funding, it does raise some challenges with that state appropriation, because it would be significantly reducing and changing the scope. But we could have that conversation with them. So I guess what I'm looking for then is a council thoughts or direction on how to proceed. It would be keep going, which if we do keep going, would be coming back to council during discussion of the CIP to add additional budget for this, which would have to come out of park impact fees or some other funding.
And under the keep going scenario, I'm not confident we're gonna make any headway with King County anytime soon.
So that's why we would focus on this reduced scope. The question then is that what council would desire, or is it anything else in addition to that reduced scope? And if it is, then we would be looking at kind of doing, figuring out, is there anything we can do that would not trigger permits? What we've outlined here would either not trigger any city permits or any King County permits to do this work.
I can add that just because there's no trail does not mean the park is not accessible. You can still walk into the park. Does the grass get long? Yes, it does. But you can have a social path through there that keeps the grass short. And I can even talk to operations about mowing a path or something like that to keep it accessible.
I think there might have to be some logs removed also if you wanted to make that accessible, but.
Sorry, say it again.
I think you may have to have some logs removed also. I've walked through there and there's things in the way.
Oh, okay.
There definitely was a trail there at one point and it's there, but
yeah,
it's getting overgrown and I think there's been a tree that fell or something like that. So.
And there's a couple of streams running through it, thus the name. And I think it'd be a good like Eagle Scout project to have a couple bridges built over those streams. So,
Councilor Lucis?
Yeah, so this is just to clarify that in terms of number 5 about the construction of a new surface water line, I know it says in that element to address surface water requirements, but that is not required if we don't go through 1 through 4 essentially. So there's no. Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilor Assassin?
2 categories of question. The first is, should we land on number 6 alone? Would the city be providing trash can and, dog poo bags? Is that part of what's going to happen there?
On the page 2 of the report, it would be refurbishing the parking lots. That would be striping, wheel stops, ADA sign. There's some fence repair needed. Installing a 4-way stop at 80th and 192nd, park rules sign, small park entry sign, dog waste station, garbage can, picnic table and or bench. So we would actually be giving people something to do there. And if they, if they do take their dogs, which have to be on a leash, then we would be providing a dog waste station.
Perfect. And then my other question is, I feel like we heard public comment today, very much in favor of staff recommendation. And I'm not familiar with this park. And I would like to hear if staff or any other council members have heard from any other opinions from the neighborhood, from the perspective of access, ADA, anything that contradicts everything else that we've heard. I just want to hear something from the other side, and I haven't, I've heard crickets, literally, so.
Yeah, I actually heard from Kenmore resident Eric Admin, a little nervous about this. He thought that it looked like we were just abandoning the master plan. I did write back to him and tell him, no, the intent is not to abandon the master plan. So that will stay adopted. But it's more of a long-term thing now. And I think we got this property turned over to us from King County like 10 years ago. And I just want to get the darn thing opened. and I just want to get it opened. And if we can just open that parking lot and remove that gate, then that's a really great first step. And we can talk in future budget cycles and CIPs about the rest of the master plan. And so again, I'm not recommending that we abandon the master plan or anything, but let's just see what can we do just to get the darn park opened.
Councilor Shrubnik?
And I'm reading this again. Are we, if we do just that, how I'm reading this is we would give money back that was granted to us by Commerce?
Well, we don't have any money yet. Because we've not asked, we don't have a contract with them, with the Department of Commerce. And so if this is the direction of council, my next step then would be to contact the Department of Commerce and ask them, would they approve, which then would have to be approved by the state, this revised scope and reducing the appropriation down to around $20,000.
Yeah, I haven't talked to you about this yet, but I also want to try to not give up as much of that money as possible. Like we have future improvements planned for 80th. Like, could we use that in front of the park? Or a Kenmore resident recently told me that there's an adjacent parcel that's vacant. Could we use that money to go towards buying that adjacent parcel? And so there's the state legislature approved the money and it's sitting there and it's being carried forward from state legislative session to state legislative session. I think we can keep having those conversations about what we can use that money for. But if push does come to shove, we may have to do as what Debbie described in the memo and reduce it down if the state doesn't allow for any creative adjacent uses.
Deputy Mayor?
I don't have any questions. I feel like what you're proposing is reasonable and makes sense. I like the thoughts that you've given towards seeking other uses for those appropriations to keep the funds in the city of Kenmore, in particular, hopefully being able to purchase additional land.
I don't want to make any promises that's what I said is probably out of scope as far as what got approved by the legislature, but I don't think it hurts to ask. So.
Any further questions? All right, thank you very much. Anything further on staff report?
Yeah, just a few more things. So this is a busy week. We have 3 events this week. We have the farmers market, and then we have Wonka, the movie, being shown same night as the farmers market, 8 o'clock in the town square. And then we have another concert on Thursday, and it's oh, I accidentally closed the window, but you can look in the schedule to see who it is. And then also we have some pretty aggressive road restriping going on next week. So it's paint striping removal, like grinding off paint and then putting in new striping. And that's going to be on 170th in front of Rhododendron Park, and then also on 68th in front of like next to Super Supplements. And a lot of the work's, not all, but a lot of the work's gonna happen at night, so. Because of traffic issues. And that's all I have.
All right. Councilmember reports and comments. Councilmember Culver.
Thank you, Mayor. I might be a little out of order here, but closing the loop on Twin Springs, if now is a good time for a motion, I would move or ask for consensus on directing staff to proceed with number 6 only, plus several other incidental changes not listed above. And I would kindly ask for a second.
Mr. Manager, do you feel like you already had direction?
Yeah, but it doesn't hurt to have a formal motion.
Okay.
I'll second it.
All right, motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Shrubnik,
I'm gonna have to vote no. I'm still uncomfortable with this, but
Councilmember Stassen,
Yes.
Councilmember Culver,
Yes.
Councilmember Lutsis,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With enough votes in favor, the motion carries.
All right.
Couple other things. And I'll try to make this quick. Grocery store merger is happening. It's a big one, and Washington is going to be hit especially hard. I think we have more stores potentially affected than many others. Obviously, Safeway is a cornerstone of the community, a big employer. A lot of folks shop there, et cetera. Yeah, this could be a fight to potentially stop it. So I won't make a long-winded case, but I would be interested in discussing a resolution opposing this merger and would kindly ask for a second. Or a discussion to potentially take it up.
I'd second discussion on that.
All right, do you want to speak to it a little bit further there, Councilmember Culver?
Yeah, and I can prepare language for it too more formally, but I don't even know all the history, frankly, but I know it's something that Attorney General Bob Ferguson has wrestled with. It's something that the Federal Trade Commission is spent a lot of time wrestling with. There have been other mergers in the past, and that has, I think, tended not to go well for grocery shoppers and for workers alike. So there's a bunch of folks opposed to it, and I would ask us to adopt a resolution opposing it.
Yeah, this is something I brought up with Rob, I think last week, maybe when the list of stores came out, trying to see if there was something that, a place for the city to do something. Because there is concern, even if the Safeway in Kenmore is sold, there's no guarantees that it would stay open or that it would, meet the needs of Kenmore. And if that were to close, then we're left with grocery outlet. It's not grocery outlet, but it doesn't meet all the needs of our community. So that closing, I think, would be detrimental to the city. And then also just these gigantic mergers are throughout our society are frankly killing competition and raising prices overall for consumers in general. So I'm not opposed to us. I don't know where the resolution would go, who we'd send it to. But I'm not opposed to us having an official position against it at all. I think couldn't hurt for the, Any other, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I'm just right with you. Fully support a resolution stopping that. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any opposition to bring in resolution? Councilor Lutsis?
Not really so much opposition, but I mean, just to your point, I don't know what sort of power or role or influence it would actually do. I mean, this is a private thing and it's being handled at levels far higher than us. That's just my only comment.
Deputy Mayor?
I think this is a case where it is worthwhile to stand up for our community and stand against a merger that's actually going to hurt more than just the people of Kenmore. It will hurt people in our state and nation. So I absolutely support a resolution. Wherever it goes, if it's going straight to the top, it's fine with me. But making a statement against this hijacking is important. It's really important. So I fully support it. Thank you.
Councilmember Sassen.
I am in favor of us being the little city that roared. And I really want to commend Councilmember Culver for bringing this forward. I had a personal reaction to it when I heard it, and I admit that it did not occur to me that we as a city could take action, and I am inspired that you brought it forward. So I just want to thank you.
Councilmember Culver, do you think you might be able to bring language to us to discuss next week? Because otherwise we're out until September.
Yeah, can do. Yes, thank you.
Okay, could you circulate that to the clerks by Friday?
Yes.
So they can circulate it out with an updated agenda?
Will do, yes. One last thing, going for broke. WashDOT and Skanska, I might be pronouncing the name wrong, forgive me. We got a lot of questions about this. I think there's jurisdictional questions in that we probably can't direct anything. I'm definitely, anyway. But we could politely ask that they engage with the community potentially. So I'm just sort of spitballing here, but I wondered if council might be interested to have a discussion to potentially ask WashDOT to have a event, town hall, something along those lines, to try to speak to some of the concerns that the community has raised, and wondered if I could potentially get a second.
Pausing before seconding, because I'm just wondering if we're too far down the line for this to have much benefit, but would this be a town hall? This is moving forward, is my understanding. So just really to inform the community, have them have a space to be heard. Is that what you're asking for? I support, like, I realize that I'm wondering what the action will actually do, except give people a sense of being heard. Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah, I think that'd be a big part of it, absolutely.
I can support that. I'll second it.
All right, discussion. Councilmember Culver, do you want to speak to your motion?
I can also draft some language for us to potentially consider in such a letter, and we can just convey that, you know, I got a bunch of emails, I got several phone calls, texts, et cetera, folks sort of wondering what's going on, what's the story with this. I think transparency is good, and I think community engagement is good, and obviously the parcel in question has been a big topic this year and many years before it. So I think it would be good to discuss as a community.
Councilmember Shubnik?
Yeah, I don't know that we need us to draft the letter. I mean, that's what staff does. So I'm fine with us asking WSDOT if they're willing to have a community forum. I mean, again, this isn't a city action. It's not a city project. It's not a city permit. And it's not us. So I just, I think the more that we involve ourselves confuses the issue. So, I mean, I think a simple question to WSDOT about whether they would like to host somewhere in the city a community forum where they could address questions from the community would be awesome.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's an important thing to do as we're kind of building trust towards whatever's going on down there in the long run. So I think a simple letter asking, or a way of asking for this would be a good idea for our community.
Unless there's any objections, could I just ask that staff put together a letter for my signature and we can get that off to WSDOT?
Letter for your signature, okay.
Yeah, I mean, if that works for everybody. Okay. Fantastic. Anything else, Councilmember Culver?
That's all I got. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Sassen.
I just want to call attention to the severe weather shelter staying open through the 18th at most recent update. That's all.
Councilmember Shubnik.
Thing to add.
Councilor Lutzis.
Yes, I do have a statement to make. And this just comes from, I think, being of a younger generation, and this is something that I've been exposed to more and more. But also something I'm just passionate about, and that comes to civility in our current state of politics. And so I just wanted to read something as I was collecting my thoughts the other day. The events recently demonstrate the dark and saddening decline of the current state of politics in our nation. Concerning rhetoric and increased polarization is spilling over into deplorable acts of violence. Democracy has no room for such actions, ever. No person should fear for exercising their fundamental democratic rights and beliefs. Every citizen and resident across our nation has the right to believe what they wish, free from threat or fear. We may not always agree, and sometimes in certain moments of contention, it may feel we never will. But in our society, we not only have a right and privilege, but a duty to keep our political discourse and debate peaceful and civil. I think it is important to remember that our neighbors, although we may not always agree with them, value and seek the best for our community and society in their own respective way. And that is their right. Many of us across the political spectrum share a number of the same basic values and identities, more often than we do differences. I vehemently condemn any violence, especially political violence, to the fullest extent, and I implore each and every person to seek the good in their neighbors, their communities, and their country, and those with the political and ideological differences that make our great nation diverse and exemplify its unique and exceptional freedoms, who are so often motivated by the same intrinsic and foundational sentiments that guide our own ideals. Please strive to find ways to bridge the growing divide and to find common ground rather than exacerbate or allow division to expand. Again, I say there is no room for violence amongst one another in these United States. My thoughts and prayers go out to the victims of the recent violent political attacks on the other side of the country and to all victims of violence, both here at home, in our community, and throughout the nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Along those lines, I had a statement that I wanted to make on two counts. This morning I was meditating under my tree, which is something I like to do. And it came through that I felt it was important to make a statement about the assassination attempt on former President Trump and that state in our nation of divide that Councilmember Lucis just drew attention to. Over the past couple of years, I've become really interested in the presidency of John F. Kennedy. And I have a couple of quotes that I'm going to read from him, and then I will try and tie this together through it. I didn't script this. So, but as I think John F. Kennedy's assassination had an indelible mark on our nation and points to a lot of the war that we are in today. I think he's an incredibly important person to look towards as a model of peace and leadership and what we can do. And it, in my view, although we are at the city of Kenmore, each and every one of us are responsible for voting and choosing a system of representatives that model our highest values and ideals. So for us here at every level, whether we're at home, in the council chamber, in the workplace, our higher elected officials, people throughout our system, we each have a valuable role, one that I do not think we, the people of the United States or this world, have ever recognized our power towards our highest potential of a peaceful world. I'm going to just read this quote from John F. Kennedy. So let us not be blind to our differences, but let us also direct attention to our common interests and to the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal. It is incredibly important that we each see our humanity. It was a hard weekend for me hearing comments from friends or people in the media who thought the world would be a better place if Donald Trump died. And I do not agree with that sentiment at all. Violence does not help us attain our goals and means. It's up to us to create a peaceful, healthy, and safe world and recognize our power. And in the United States, we have the power to vote and elect people who are aligned with our values. My next quote, and I think this was, this goes to something that I've been wanting to bring up since the first or second week of October. I'm just going to start with, I'll finish with this quote. I won't start with his quote, but I'm just going to state publicly, because of what I wondered, who am I? You know, we always look back to that World War story. What are we going to do if the Nazis are here and people are being imprisoned and encamped? What are we going to do, and who are we when we witness genocide? A recent study showed last week that the projected death toll as of today, projected, not all the deaths yet, but the projected death toll in Palestine or in Gaza is 186,000 people. That's 8% of the current population. Who are we not to stand up and say, this is wrong? And why am I bringing this up? Our US dollars are going to fund genocide. Therefore, we are responsible for those dollars and have to acknowledge our role in this crime against humanity. So today I decided I had to state, I support a ceasefire, safe return, and reparations for all Palestinians ejected from Gaza, and those that are experiencing strife in the West Bank for that matter. It is up to us to find a path to peace. I believe in peace, and I believe that each and every one of us, if we just pray for it, find a place in our heart to speak to it, set intentions, meditate for it, our elevation, our connected consciousness, our collective consciousness matters. Belief in this truth that peace is possible starts with us, and that is the seed that helps it grow. And I believe in us. And I've said this before, that we are living through the most violent times I can imagine. I mean, some people say that it's been worse in the past, but I've never seen it. And it's incredibly heartbreaking. And I know we're all breaking. Our hearts are breaking all over the place. And it's up to us to heal our hearts and create that peaceful world that we deserve in our lifetime. We don't have to be serving a military industrial complex. We can be serving humanity and our highest and greatest good. And there are a lot of places that we need help, but I'm just asking us to, whatever your soul intention is, wherever your space is, believe in your goodness and your power to make a difference. So I'm going to give two quotes from Kennedy that I think speak to this. I speak of peace, said Kennedy, as the necessary rational end of rational men. I realize the pursuit of peace is not as dramatic as the pursuit of war, and frequently the words of the pursuer fall on deaf ears, but we have no more urgent task. And the second, which is one that I think really, most of us probably heard it, but it's one that I really appreciate. And he speaks of peace, not a Pax Americana enforced on the world by American weapons of war,
not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I am talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow, to hope and build a better life for their children, not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women, not merely peace in our time, but peace for all time. This is something I genuinely believe in. I'm thankful that we have history and people like John F. Kennedy's words, at least for me, to inspire me. And I pray for us and what's going forward. Just remember, as Nathan said, our neighbors, we need to see there is pain. There's anger and pain, and we can get angry at their anger, or we can seek to understand it and transmute it into understanding so we can work together towards our goal of peace. Thank you.
Not a whole lot to report. Had a great time kicking off the concert last week. I appreciate the deputy mayor will be doing that for me this week while I'm out of town, and also the movie. I'm kind of bummed to miss Wonka. I've never had to look up this rule before, but I don't want to have to look it up again. But I do want to point out that council reports are limited to 5 minutes for folks. It's not something we bumped up against before. I just want to flag that for folks going forward to try to be a little concise, especially at the end of the meeting. I know there's a lot going on and people are in a very emotional place. So I didn't want to interrupt anybody today, but I did want to flag that going forward. So if nothing more come before